Recording in progress.
Please rise as you are able. I now call this meeting of City Council to order.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
The City of Barrie acknowledges the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also acknowledge the Wendat Nation Huron, who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and recognizing the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. We're committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You may be seated. As there's no student mayors this evening, we will move on to the confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the City Council meeting held on January 18th, 2023 have been circulated. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted as printed and circulated, and we will move on past awards and recognition, reports from officers, deputations, tax applications, and communications, of which there are nil. And we will move to committee reports. Deputy Mayor Thompson, I believe you have the motions.
Thank you, Mayor Nod. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Hamilton, that Section A of General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that Section A of the General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. Included in this are motions 23-G-014, authorization to negotiate limiting distance and encroachment agreements with debut waterfront residences, 55 Dunlop Street West, and 23-G-015, Ontario Land Tribunal Report, acquisition of 922 Veterans Drive to facilitate Mackay Road row expansion, redrive to west of Highway 400 and Veterans Drive new trunk water main. Are there any questions or comments around the table? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? It's approved.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that Section B of General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that Section B of the General Committee Report dated January the 26th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. This is 23-G-016, memorandum from circulation list, dated January 25th, 2023, concerning an update on the permanent market. Are there any questions or comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that Section C of the General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be received.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that Section C of the General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be received. 23-G-017, confidential personal information matter, part of motion 23-G-012, referred by City Council on January the 18th, 2023, appointments to the Committee of Adjustment. Are there any questions or comments regarding the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that Section D of the General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that Section D of the General Committee Report dated January 25th, 2023, as circulated, be adopted. This is 23-G-018, appointments to the Committee of Adjustment. Are there any questions or comments regarding this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And it carries. There's no deferred business or direct motions that we've notified of, so we will move on to presentations. We have 3 presentations this evening. The presentations will be from the Barrie Police Services Board, the Barrie Public Library, and the County of Simcoe regarding the budgets. I'd like to invite the Police Board Chair and the Police Chief to the podium for the presentation this evening. Before the Chair and the Chief are to make their presentation, after the presentation, Council will be afforded the opportunity to ask questions. There's some reminders I wanted to make sure that we were all familiar with beforehand in terms of the request from the Police Board and what our opportunities are and aren't to influence that. And also remind members of Council through this process, and if we do dig into it in questions, I'm sure it'll come up further, that the police budget doesn't naturally expand like the city's budget in terms of as units are added to the city of Barrie, they aren't able to automatically reap some of those new taxes that come out. Those are controlled through the budget requests and approvals from the police service and our council. With all that in mind, Mr. Chair, if you would like to start your presentation, and we will, sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nettle. I have to declare here. In order to meet my legislative requirements under Section 17, Sub 3 of the Police Services Act, I will not participate in this presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I apologize for not going to you sooner. Mr. Chair, you may now begin your presentation, and following that, there will be some questions from members of Council, I'm sure.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Nuttall, Deputy Mayor Thompson, and members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Barrie Police Services budget request for 2023. I'm joined here by our newly sworn Chief Johnson, who we'll hear from in a moment. After several months of planning and decision-making, the team at the Barrie Police Service presented a draft budget to the Board's Budget Subcommittee and in turn the Board. After detailed review, the 2023 budget request was approved on October 27 in an open public meeting. The Board believes the 2023 budget request is necessary, physically responsible, and provides sustainable police service delivery to the citizens of Barrie. 2023 marks the start of Barrie Police's new strategic plan, and this year's budget will support 3 key strategic priorities: prevent and address crime, leverage partnerships to reduce social disorder, and build a resilient organization. The budget supports the city's community safety and well-being plan, as well as fulfilling core policing responsibilities, increase public expectations, and ensure sustainable and evidence-based delivery of police services while addressing increased financial pressures. Salaries, benefits, and overtime. The Barrie Police Service continues to provide critical services to the community through investments made in infrastructure, equipment, technology, training, and most importantly, its people. The board recognizes the members of the service are the community's greatest asset, and through the sworn officers and civilians, the service provides a wide range of services to our community. Salaries, benefits, and overtime at $56.5 million represent 94.4% of the 2023 budget request and are directly reflected in the services provided to the community. Included in the budget request is the impact of contractual salary increases, reclassifications and promotions, retirements, and new 2023 hires. The Barrie Police Service partners with the City of Barrie to achieve economies of scale with respect to benefit providers. However, budget pressures are still being experienced through increased usage and provider rates in health, dental, long-term disability, life insurance, and OMERS premiums. Maximum contributions for Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance are also increasing. Legislative impacts. The Supporting Ontario's First Responders Act was introduced in 2016 and provides WSIB benefits for emergency responders experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. The financial impact of this legislation has been significant for police services across the province since its introduction and will continue to result in financial pressures for several years to come. Members' wellness has, is, and will always be the top priority for the Barrie Police Service. The total salary and benefits cost for members supported by the legislation in 2023 will represent an increase of 30.5% from 2022. Unavoidable increases. Without an increase in the current year's staffing numbers, 2023 salaries would result in a budgetary increase of 3.5%. Related benefits would require a further increase of 1.7%. Assuming the 2022 overtime budget is maintained, the budget request will increase by 5.2%. Salaries and benefits for members who are supported by the Supporting Ontario's First Responders Act will add another 1.5% budgetary increase. Salaries, benefits, and overtime using 2022 staffing levels result in a 6.7% increase to the 2023 budget. Authorized and actual sworn officers. The 2023 budget includes the addition of 5 sworn officers and 4 civilian positions. Despite the growth of the city, this marks the first increase in sworn officers since 2020 and in alignment with the approved staffing plan that has been strategically gapped for the last 2 years. I'd like to call upon Chief Johnson to share the impact of the new hires we'll have on the Barrie Police Service and our community. Chief Johnston.
Thank you, Board Chair. Mayor, councillors, our commitment, the Barrie Police Service's commitment, is to the community. We are frontline focused in ensuring our resources are providing the services that our community expects. With finite resources, we are dedicated to put as much as possible to the operational level of our organization and the supports that allow us to effectively and efficiently leverage our greatest strength, our people. Through our sworn officers and civilians, we provide a range of policing services to the community, including crime prevention, investigative services for crimes against person, human trafficking, tech crimes, homicide, fraud, traffic, and many others. All of our services support and seek to improve community safety and well-being. Community safety and well-being is not a line item in a budget. It is part of our ethos. Our 5 new hires will be frontline uniform officers going directly to frontline policing. And our civilian positions will support high-harm, evidence-based policing and member wellness. The majority of our sworn officers are in community-focused frontline policing roles, including those we have supporting our joint efforts with our community agency partners. These new positions will strengthen our capabilities, responsiveness, and resilience to better meet expectations. Police legitimacy, in part, relies on a public safety organization's ability to effectively carry out its duties. These personnel will continue to help the Barrie Police Service maintain the safety and security of our growing community for a safer tomorrow, today. Chair.
Thank you, Chief Johnston. These additions to the staffing level will increase the 2023 budget by 0.47%. Officer ratios. This slide demonstrates data collected by Statistics Canada, which notes the number of officers per 100,000 in population, also known as cop to pop. You can see that between 2018 and 2019, we grew from 158 to 160 officers per 100,000. However, by 2021, that ratio had dropped to 156 officers, which reflects the growing population and a lack of growth in the number of sworn officers. When compared to similar-sized municipalities, the Barrie Police Services is in the middle of the pack, but well below the provincial average in 2021 of 176 officers per 100,000, and even farther below the national average of 183 officers per 100,000 population. Operating expenditures represent 7.9% of the total, 7.9 million, of the total budget request. Operating expenditures include facility costs, insurance, vehicle gasoline and maintenance, staff development and wellness initiatives, uniforms and equipment, operating supplies, and technology infrastructure. Costs associated with grant expenditures are included in operating expenses and have increased $594,000 from 2022. This is directly related to increased grant revenue. As grant revenues increase, so do grant expenditures. The main operating expenditures include IT maintenance, which incorporates costs associated with software costs for body-worn cameras, firewall upgrades, and enhancement of information technology security protocols. The service has also seen increase due to inflation. As in prior years, all operating expenditures have been reviewed and reductions were made where feasible. Revenue. The final area of the operating budget is grants, secondments, and other revenue. Total revenue and recoveries for 2023 is $6.9 million, which is an increase of $1.28 million over 2022. Overall, the 2023 budget request includes $662,000 in increased grant revenue. The service continues to apply for all available funding opportunities. In 2013, revenue was $1.6 million. In 2023, the service successfully generates $6.9 million in revenues. Transfers to capital reserve. The service transfers to capital reserve represents $1.88 million and includes costs for fleet vehicles, I-2 equipment, and specialized police equipment and radios. This amount takes into account projected cost increases across those industries. It's important to note that in 2010, the Barrie Police Service capital budget was $1.6 million. The City of Barrie radio system upgrade includes a transfer to the city of $220,000. This commitment to the city continues to 2029. The funding requirements commenced in 2014, and we've contributed approximately $1.5 million to date. Budget recap. Here's a visual aid showing the breakdown of the 2023 budget requirements. Our transfer to capital of 1.9, legislative impacts of 3.7, the revenue we will generate of just under 7 million, operating expenditures just under 8, salary, benefits, and overtime of $56.6 million. Policing budget and the Barrie population. This chart illustrates the percentage of the Barrie police budget of the City of Barrie's overall budget, which has been declining despite the rising population of the City of Barrie. In 2011, we comprised 25.1% of the city's budget. We currently sit at 22.1%. This illustrates how increasingly challenging it has been to maintain sustainable police service in a growing city like Barrie. After a lengthy and deliberate process, the board is satisfied that this is the municipal funding that is required to provide adequate and effective police services in 2023. It is comprised of its operating budget, its capital request, and legislative items for a total municipal funding requirement of $63,239,000. Mayor Nuttall, Deputy Mayor Thompson, members of council, and the citizens of Barrie, we as a board recognize this as a significant funding request, especially in these increasingly difficult times. However, we believe it is vital we get back to the sworn and civilian levels planned and approved by the board. Of the 20 police services we surveyed, we found requests as low as 2.5% and as high as 11.5%. We feel this is in a reasonable range. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to present the Barrie Police Service 2023 budget request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Johnston, for your presentation this evening. I'm sure there'll be questions around the table. I'm going to kick off with a couple. And I sit here not as a member of the Police Services Board, obviously, but as the Mayor of the City of Barrie, although I do sit in both positions. My question, Mr. Chair, is does your proposed budget provide a full complement of officers to the City of Barrie this year?
At full complement in terms of planning 250 sworn officers, but due to the Ontario First Responders Act, there's approximately 19 members of the service. I think it's 14 sworn officers and 5 civilians that are not available for that complement. And then there'll be other officers and civilians that are off for obvious things such as maternity, long-term disability, et cetera. So the numbers do not include, are not the numbers that are fully deployed.
In terms of full complement of officers, what is that number, just to confirm, is it 250?
250, correct.
And what was the last time that we had a full complement of officers?
I think we'd have to go back to 2020.
To 2020?
Yeah, 2019.
2019?
It's been since 2020, we have not.
Okay, thank you. In terms of fees, and members of council, we're going to have a number of presentations this evening that will include budgets that include a whole bunch of different items. One of the unique things that I found as I was going through the budget binders and the service requests was the fees associated with the service that each of these organizations deliver. And I'll give you an example. If there's a fine laid by the Conservation Authority, the funds go to the Conservation Authority. If there's something the County Simcoe charges a fee for, they go to the County of Simcoe. If the police lays a fine, it goes towards court costs. It doesn't go towards the frontline service. And I thought that was it's the only one that stood out that way. Every other one stood out in a, that the revenue created went to the bottom line of the organization that was presenting this evening. I'll open up to members of council for questions. Are there any questions on my left? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you, Mr. Ferguson and Chief Johnston. Appreciate the presentation, and I also, fully disclose I'm taking the evidence-based policing course right now through Cambridge University. Thank you to the encouragement of Chief Johnston. So a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous, so I apologize in advance. But I do appreciate your perspective and your use of evidence to inform policing, and I recognize, and as many would who've taken the course, policing traditionally hasn't done a good job of using evidence and data to inform how it uses its finite resources. So I appreciate that that's a position you're taking to help move us forward. Am I correct that a lot of the challenges, and you mentioned a discrepancy in police budget increases from 2.5 to 11 point something, is some of this kind of embedded in that there's no clear standard for a cop-to-pop ratio like, you show the ratio, and it's great. We're not in the high end, not in the low end. We're kind of in a sweet spot. But is it a sweet spot? It just is what it is? And is there work happening in the police sector to try to create some sort of standards so we would know that for a population of 100,000 people, you would have X amount of officers, not ours is here, so it's pretty good, or ours is there, it's way too high, or like, is that type of evaluation coming?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Harris. At the board level, we don't look at that detail, but I can certainly advise council that in terms of evidence-based policing and developing our model to police the city of Barrie, we are considered leaders in that industry, and certainly Chief Johnston is considered a leader. So, we are looking for opportunities to change the way we police. And that one of those ways is certainly by way of evidence-based policing. As to how that ratio works out with other agencies, I wouldn't be able to comment.
So thank you. As a follow-up, so one of the emerging is accreditation standards for policing. Is that something that is on the Barrie Police Services radar?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Harris. I'm sorry. Could you just repeat it for me, please? Yeah, accreditation standards for policing. There's some services that are using accreditation standards. Is that something that's on the radar? It's not on the board radar, Chief Johnston.
I can speak to that, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Through you, Mayor. So there is no actual national nor provincial accreditation. There are some out of California, out of the U.S., and there's various organizations or state level. At a national level, the benchmarking of police services does not exist in any substantial way. That doesn't mean that can't happen. That doesn't mean that shouldn't happen. Provincially, Ontario is a very progressive province and has some of the most progressive services in it, and certainly that is something to be explored. The Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police has been pushing that, but so has the Police Association of Ontario. There is a desire to see that, and I think that's in more towards a transparent way of moving forward as a police service.
Yeah, thank you. And again, in support of what you do, it just feels like if there was more certainty, it would create a little less challenge. And I reflect back on every year we do a budget allocation tool. In 2021, the findings, such that they are, was overall interest in a decrease. 2022, overall interest in an increase in services. So, maybe that suggests the tool is not accurate, or what it might suggest is interest in policing. But whether it's more police, less police, I think we all want better policing, and I appreciate that evidence-based policing approach really tries to drill down on that. Is there something that you could highlight to us as far as better policing that you look forward to in this budget that will contribute to better policing?
Through you, Mayor. Fair question. In my world, certainly I would see the metric of a measurement of harm. Year over year, and appreciating crime happens in any community, and an effective police service is not about just reducing the number of crimes, but the types of crime. And so when we talk about the types of crime, I speak about harm, and harm is the actual societal effect of crime types on a community, and that is the focus of the Barrie Police. We are concerned about all crime, and that is not to minimize the victimization of someone who is a victim of what at a broad level might be a lower level crime, a small mischief or a small theft. There are no small crimes if you are the victim and it hurts. And I'm not trying to suggest that's the case, but the reality is at a societal and a community level, we look at the harm from crime. And I wouldn't suggest that anyone at the council would think that a small mischief and a violent sexual assault are in any way, shape, or form similar. One is far more harmful, but they both count as one crime each. At the Barrie Police Service, we are looking at the harm created from that more serious crime, and we're taking our finite resources and we are focusing on those. We are not forgetting the lower level crimes. We are looking at more effective and more efficient ways of exploring how to respond to those.
That's all for me. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that focus on harm reduction. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kunkel.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall. To board chair and chief. I'll let you decide how to handle the following question, but I think it more directly. This one relates to building off the conversation with Councillor Harris. And I think to Chief Johnston's, your comment about how to respond, to those situations of harm. And so I'm wondering about where in the budget, with those sworn officers you've identified, or in general, just in the approaches, some of that may be around looking at, I'll say, some of the current situations happening with some of our schools. So I know historically there is a shift in policing from, I think, a presence in schools. I've had the benefit of learning more about some of the situational factors happening, I think, across the city. And we've had some discussions past term at this table where we talked a bit about, how situations on school grounds then spill over into municipal property, and the interests across both bylaw officers to safety of community to in-school situations. And I'm not aware of any changes planned around perhaps bringing back in supports into schools. I didn't know if it was fair to ask you if you could comment on that, and if that's part of harm reduction. I am hearing, and unfortunately have sat with parents whose children have been hospitalized due to situations that have occurred in neighborhoods. But there is a dynamic around a relationship with schools. So is that something, when I look between the budget that you're presenting this evening and your strategic plan, we should appreciate, or is that part of the priority area of focus around relationships with school boards and policing?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle, I can advise you that certainly the board has addressed the issue and has asked the chief to take a look into it as to what exactly is in this budget. We don't drill down to that extent, but it has been addressed at the board level, and the chief and the senior command will be taking a look at it.
Thank you, and I think while I won't get into the minutiae of some of your budget, when it's coming at the same time as your strategic plan, I can tell you, residents I'm hearing from are quite curious to say, where does noise fit into the traffic calming strategies? Where does safety and partnerships with school boards come in? And so I think that, should it come in a future communication, would be helpful around how the budget or the resource focus may address those areas that are frequent, I would say, from at least residents that I'm speaking with. The other question I have is, again, when I look at this in comparison to your strategic plan, and you do talk about building a resilient organization, and slide 7, Chief, you did speak to kind of 5 sworn officers and other areas of focus. I did notice chaplain there. So I did want to ask broadly, knowing that we see chaplains used or embedded in different organizations. Is this a new position, or is this something that you're recommitting to? If you could speak to that and how it supports the diversity of your team.
Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle, I can certainly answer that. It is a second chaplain. Okay. So we have one, and we're adding a second chaplain, just to, again, partly to the growth of the service, and more importantly to the need and the wellness of the members of the service. In terms of our budget cost, it is not significant. It's uniforms and some training, so it's not significant to the budget. The position is very significant to the Barrie Police Service.
Thank you. I didn't recall that from past budgets, so I did want to just take a moment to kind of identify that. I appreciate that. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was very well done. I appreciated you bringing along and sending out, actually, your strategic plan the other day. And I wanted to ask you about 2 items on the strategic plan. Under priority 2, you talk about the collaborate with social service agencies to strengthen diversion referrals, and secondly, to continue to support the City of Barrie's community safety and well-being plan. And I know the police service has been very instrumental in the community and well-being plan. So I wanted to know sort of what are the things that you're planning on this year in fulfillment of those 2 actions?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Rietma. Again, I can advise you at the board that we've certainly, the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, there's 15 initiatives. The Barrie Police Service leads or co-leads in 11 of those 15. So it's extremely important to our service. In terms of collaboration, there's a number of things that we've addressed. We're looking at the Justice Center, the Barrie Health Accord, community outreach. There's a number of services. And in 2021, I believe the board directed the chief to continue to look and report on a quarterly basis for opportunities to look at alternative response mechanisms. So that is a priority that was identified by the board, and the chief will be reporting to us to see if there is any opportunity for which we can divert calls to police officers. The calls for service continue to increase. This year they went slightly down in terms of overall calls, but the emergency calls went up 10.4% in 2023 over 2022. So those increased calls for emergency service require our personnel, and we need to find a way, if there's an opportunity, to continue to divert those calls, and it is a priority.
Are any of the new staff resources that you are requesting focused on the diversion factor?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Reba. At the budget level, we don't get down to specifics how a new sworn officer would be deployed. That's up to the chief and senior command. That said, as the chief said earlier in the evening, the 5 new officers will be frontline officers, and they will be deployed at the discretion of the chief and senior command. We as a board cannot comment on the operational. We can provide guidance and advice, but it will be the chief that will decide.
Thank you, Councilor Rittman. Councilor Morales, Hamilton, and then Councilor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. Question to the chief. Chief, fleet management. So, fleet management. So, obviously, as you know, I'm a big fan of EVs for almost all vehicles that we can do in the city of Barrie. Barrie Police has a unique opportunity because a police officer, at least like a boots-on-the-ground police officer, their office is essentially their vehicle. And while there are lots of intricate details about your laptop, your management, and other equipment, the difference is the evolution in technology that has happened in the last 5 years, but even the last year, between your standard EVs that you and I might think look like a little hatchback versus what the market is finally producing. As you know, of all people, the Mustang Mach-E, the Chevy Blazer EV is and in July they announced they're coming out with a built for police officers version. And I was just reading now, the harnesses are in the spots they need to be to have everything connected. The mileage is being produced, so they're both the Mach-E and the Blazer EV are getting 515 and 520 kilometers per charge. With 25-30% battery degradation in Canadian winters, that still is about 330-350 kilometers of available range. What do you envision, just because I know it doesn't make up the 52 million or the big category, but it still obviously makes up a significant portion of operating and then transferring to capital reserve for replacement. So could you in appropriate detail go into explain to council, I guess, your vision and your plans for conversion of Barrie Police's fleet to EV?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, I think I can answer that question for Councilor Morales. Yeah, there's the fleet's approximately 103, 104 units is the total fleet. Of that, 24% are either hybrid or electric vehicles. So the service continues to add. In the replacement this year is 13 new vehicles. Those are all replacements. They're not additional vehicles. So we are, although the service is growing, our fleet is reducing. We track all our vehicles. We have the software to track them, and that has allowed us to increase the amount of both electric and hybrid vehicles in the fleet.
So through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'm not asking about hybrids, so they're very distinct. So the reason I was directing the question to the chief is the chief and I have had conversations about his vision specifically for EV. So it's just no disrespect to you, of course. Is there, what's the status update, chief, on where we are at with EV only implementation to the fleet? It sounds like we're taking all of the above solution, which is fine to have hybrids, I guess, in the mix. But is that something that we're further down than when we talked about it last July, or where are we kind of at this spot?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. Yes, so, Councillor, it's a little bit of supply and demand. And so the ability to get full EVs is still quite challenging. For our fleet, I can advise you that we are adding another 2 full EV vehicles this year have been ordered. But the hybrid vehicles, looking at our mileage and our usage, we've seen with the hybrids, I know they're very separate, but they certainly offer benefit. And I can advise you that the mileage traveled by all vehicles was reduced by 9.6, but the fuel usage was reduced by 16%. So the fuel percentage was greater than the mileage traveled. So the hypothesis is a hybrid vehicle effect. That is not insignificant when you consider the cost of fuel. And please appreciate, so it's, I am fully aware of the value of the EV, and I am a full supporter of it. But and I like to move fast, but there is a pace at which we can move and which we'd like to move, and it's a balance. So we are certainly exploring the hybrid vehicle and securing full EVs when we can. But we do see value in both the hybrid. It's the idling time of a vehicle that's really the damage to an engine with a internal combustion. Not to go into too much detail, but having said that, we do see some value in moving forward with the hybrid and the full electric.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And I think this is a question for Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, a lot of what I'm seeing in this presentation is there's externalities that are forcing the budget to increase beyond the standard that Barrie Police and we expected it to go up. Basically, a lot of provincial legislation mandates. And this might be a later question, not when they're still presenting, but do we have the capability to flesh out increases, at least in, I know we've done it in the past, Council, differentiates the DERF and other initiatives, but I'm hearing a bit of similar sentiments from Mayor Cam Guthrie in Guelph. He wants to implement a mental health response tax, and then he wants to flesh it out. I know other municipalities are talking about it. Is that something that we can get to that granular detail to flesh out basically provincially mandated, the financial impact of provincial mandated legislation, specifically as it relates to Barrie Police? Through you, Mayor Nuttall.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales and Council. Certainly, we can, as we have in the past, we can try and isolate. Well, if we have it in the binder, we can certainly see what we can do over the next week for you.
Okay, thank you. And it's not so much for blame, it's just like, again, the average person, they think you guys are asking for all this money. They think Barrie Police, they think council. And I think the more people flesh things out, the more they understand who's asking for what, and then a greater sense of allocation of responsibility and positive accountability then come forward when you make things more accountable for all departments.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you to you both for the presentation and the service provided by Barrie Police. And while I'm a huge supporter, I am going to note that 7.28 is a substantial increase. So whether one can justify it or not, I do want to note that it is substantial. As a board, do you look at the overall budget spend on admin versus boots on the ground? And is there sort of a proportion or percentage that you try to aim for in terms of that balance?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Ms. Councillor Hamilton. No, we do not. In terms of our budget, it is total personnel. Again, where those resources are deployed and how they're used, that's up to the chief. And the financial reporting is not broken down. It's by salaries, wages, and benefits. So that breakdown is not available. Okay. We don't account for it either in the budget or in our financial reporting.
Okay, thank you. In follow-up to that, then, just the salary increases as well, and again, I'm sure they're granted. I come from the healthcare sector, so salaries have been frozen at 1% for years and years, and that's true for many other public sectors and even the private sector. I think over the last few years, not many people have seen increases. So the 3.5% increase in salaries without the addition of new staff, how is that number decided upon? Is that based on, issues and concerns with recruitment and retention? Is it based on market rates? Can you just explain how that number is landed upon?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton. All our members of our service are currently under contract. The major service, part of the service, the front line expires in 2023, and the senior management is 2024. So that 3.5% increase is all contractual contracts entered into prior to this year, as well as some promotions, as well as some retirements. But the 3.5 is all contractual.
Okay. And is that a sliding scale, the 3.5, or is it already paid at top salary, or is that, do you ask for the 3.5 in terms of being prepared for any movement within that sliding scale?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor, that the increase is set in the contract.
Okay.
1.8 or 2%, but then there's changes in terms of promotions, advancements, et cetera. The total cost, if nothing changes, would be 3.5%.
Okay. Thank you. One more question, if I may. So I've read, and I apologize, I don't remember where I read it. I've read multiple presentations and strategic plans, but 20% of calls are crime-related. Is that accurate?
What we call emergencies.
Emergency.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you just describe the other 80% in terms of the contribution to mental health or social services, or what that other 80% looks like a little bit more?
I think I may have the breakdown. We certainly get that breakdown. Sorry. Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Hamilton. We get that information every quarter at the board, and we review it. So those numbers are available. I don't think I have them in front of me now.
Okay.
Certainly, a major one is 911 hang-ups, which say, well, that doesn't require much of an ask of our police service. It certainly does. Mm-hmm. They all have to be followed up, looked into, because you don't, there's many of the calls for service are 911 hang-ups, but yeah. That would be the majority in our quarterly. But the emergency numbers, as I made reference, are up 10.4% over 2022.
Is that based on population growth, or what can that be attributed to?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that.
No, that's okay. It's just the reason I'm asking in terms of what the calls are based on. I wonder if that data is used, just getting back to Councillor Harris's point, if that data is used to inform partnerships that are developed. I know you've got some pilot projects, I think, going on with health services as well. And I just wonder if that is based on, data and what the calls are being reflective of, so that you can inform who you should be partnering with and where it makes most sense.
Mayor Nuttall, through you, again, to Councillor Hamilton. Absolutely. We analyze the data. That's, again, going back to, the evidence-based policing and what the calls for service are and how we can better respond to those services. We are absolutely looking at that and looking for opportunities.
And then just one final comment, if I may, Mayor Nuttall, I apologize. Chief Johnson, I got your email today in regards to more information for the Citizens on Patrol program, which I think is fantastic, and I like hearing tonight as well, sort of the more community-based approach that is, obvious in your strategic plan, in your presentation tonight as well. And I understood from today's email that some of that budget for Citizens on Patrol comes from the volunteer and auxiliary budget. I'm just wondering if you can tell me what sort of, again, to me, that is a very cost-effective way to approach a number of safety concerns in our community, and a program that I think should be leveraged. I had the opportunity to do a ride-along with them this summer, so I'm just wondering from a budget perspective, what is allocated to them for the sustainability of that type of program?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, and that email was purposeful in so far as to advise and inform the council. So Citizens on Patrol is incredibly cost effective, but more importantly, it's certainly a community building and a legitimacy building service for the Barrie Police and our community. These are volunteers that help, that come out, they want to be part and make things better. In terms of specific budget, that becomes a challenging question in any initiative. And so I'll be brief insofar as that we have Citizens on Patrol, we fully fund them, we fully support them. But it's just, they're not fine lines that we can say this goes to them, this goes to that, because our Citizens on Patrol use some of the same equipment that our officers do in terms of technology, software, tracking. Like there's an app we've had developed in-house through our IT, and they use that. Our Citizens on Patrol use that, but so do our officers in terms of canvassing. So when they're assisting detectives, so the detectives can focus on an actual investigation, the Citizens on Patrol are out there using that canvassing app and feeding information directly into the detectives so they can action that. So it's not so we have a vehicle. That vehicle is part of the fleet. The fleet belongs to the Barrie Police Service, that belongs to the City of Barrie. So it's one of those where you look at it. There's just not a fine line. we fully support it, and we continue to, and we're actually looking at expanding that and excited to explore where it's going to go.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for that clarity. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Negussi.
Thank you. Through to you, Mayor Nadal. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a few comments / question. I mentioned this to Chief Johnson during our recent meeting, but I'm going to repeat that in front of the council. I believe that the police primary job is not to look after or search after criminals. The police primary job is to prevent crime before it's committed. So, and one of the crime prevention method is police visibility, police patrolling. And to be honest, during my campaign, there are a lot of people who live in fear. They feel they're not protected. And in my opinion, by having more police visibility in our neighborhood and the street, number one, we can prevent crime, and two, we can change our public, perception. So that's my comment, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Negussi. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. This is more of a comment and a little bit to what Councillor Hamilton had said. Thank you for the presentation, and I know the work that goes into this. You two are standing up here, but it's a team that puts this together in numbers, and I appreciate that. It is a large ask, and as I do sit on the board, I realize it, and it's tough when society is in a hole, in a tough place to look at a number like this, and some of the comments you hear is top heavy. Policing, administrative, the third floor, not the boots on the ground is what the public want. And my comment is Chief Johnson, I was, part of the selection of you as the chief, as a board member. And some of it was based on your forward thinking and, your beliefs in the, I don't want to say new policing, but, a better tomorrow of, a community collaboration and stuff, but I really hope to see a continuation of, less white shirts, to be frank, and more of the people in our neighborhoods as a community policing, as a relationship building. So I understand that this is, and I know the chair had said since 2020 we haven't had but it's actually, we've underfunded police for probably 12 to 13 years, just on the slide of 5.2% being legislative and contractual. This is, a large budget, and I'll keep my personal opinion on how it got to this point, but I just think that it's something we've really, I don't want to see this kind of increase every year, and I understand that we're playing a little bit of catch up, but I also want to see more of a presence and more of a utilize the resources we have, that we can see more of a presence in our communities. So thank you. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, members of council. I didn't have the opportunity to vote on this budget as a member of the police board because it was the former mayor, not myself. I didn't have the opportunity to be part of the recruitment process for Chief Johnson because it was the previous police board, not the current one. And I won't give my full comments on this, obviously, because we're going to have this debate in terms of the actual budget itself. I will say this, that there's a lot of language around defunding, unfunding, increased funding. And my personal belief is if there's a complement that's required, if it's not met, it's a defunding of the police service. That's happened. It's happened for years. It's my personal opinion. There'll be lots of different opinions around this table in the public. I'll also say this, Chief Johnson, that what you're hearing from Councillor Negussi, from Councillor Hamilton, from Deputy Mayor, in other ways from Councillor Kungle, from Councillor Ritma around the table, is the idea of both presence of police and the direction of calls as they come in, going into the right places so that help can be given to individuals. And as I see it, we need to see more on the ground. And I hope you take the next 24 months to do that. It's something I heard at the door quite often. And, time will tell the tale on that. But thank you for your presentation this evening. Thank you for taking the time to come to us. And thank you for bringing some real information and transparency around policing in our city, because it is something that I think that will help our residents understand both what you do, how you do it, and also the requirement for funds to do it. So we ask you to keep our city safe, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll now move on to the second presentation this evening, which will be from the Barrie Public Library. I'd like to call upon Lauren Jessup, Chief Executive Officer of the Barrie Public Library, and Austin Mitchell, Chair of the Barrie Public Library Board, to provide their presentation. Welcome to Barrie City Council.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Nuttall and members of council. It's been a bit since we've been here in person. The library's goals for 2023 continue to address the need to reach individuals and families throughout our growing community while maintaining a modest budget increase over last year. This budget maintains service levels and allows us to build on the successes of 2022. Last year saw some amazing positive change for the library. We are so thankful and proud to have opened our boutique library in Holly, acquired our BPL on-the-go outreach van, expanded our library of things, and installed book kiosks in 2 Barrie recreation centers. We accomplished so much last year that this year will be a time for catching our breath, making smaller tweaks and improvements to our services, and continuing our focus on ensuring library services are accessible to all. With a more typical year planned, we are presenting a maintenance budget below the budget increase recommended for service partners. I hope you will indulge me for a few minutes before we get into the meat of our budget to share some of the great things we achieved last year. The library's biggest objective in 2022 was opening the Barrie Public Library location in the Holly neighborhood. We so appreciate the assistance of councillors and city staff in making this a reality. Since this space opened in August, residents are popping in to attend programs, to use the meeting room, and to borrow materials, with many walking and biking over to enjoy the space. Children's programming is especially popular at Holly, with numbers matching what we were seeing at Painswick and downtown. Our assumption early on was that some of the traffic from our other locations would move over to Holly, but the numbers for programs continue to be high across all locations. We are very pleased with the community's response to Holly and look forward to welcoming even more residents in to enjoy the space as word spreads. Our service model meets our community where they are. In 2022, we were able to purchase a van for staff use, allowing us to expand outreach to meet more people out in the community. From the ever-popular Holly outdoor story times to story walks in city parks, to engaging activities at our open-air Dunlop tent and food security programs with Barrie Housing, library staff engaged more than 4,000 visitors at outreach events last year. With grant support from the Healthy Communities Initiative, we were able to add large format blocks, lawn games, and other items that encourage learning through play. Outdoor Storytime supports children's natural curiosity and learning. Like traditional Storytime, these programs provide stories, rhymes, and music with a focus on early literacy and parent education, so that caregivers come away with literacy skills they can continue at home. Supporting literacy is at the core of what we do. With 45% of Canadians lacking the literacy, numeracy, and digital skills to thrive in the knowledge economy, the opportunities we offer to support learning and personal growth at any age are more important than ever. We offer a whole host of opportunities like one-on-one tech coaching, access to early literacy programs, tutoring for children, digital life skills for seniors, business development for entrepreneurs, and I could go on and on. March of last year saw pandemic restrictions begin to ease, and with that, we were able to ramp up our programming. By Q3, we saw a return to pre-pandemic program numbers. Despite a slower start, we shared our programming with over 25,000 participants last year. In 2022, 9,727 new members joined the over 34,000 members who actively used their library cards. New and existing patrons continue to browse and borrow both digital and physical materials, and we've seen a 3.7% increase this year in digital circulation alone. Our library spaces saw 340,000 visitors last year, with high demand for meeting space, computers, laptops, and access to Wi-Fi. In the last quarter, we saw a return to pre-pandemic numbers in terms of visits to our spaces and our number of program participants. We expect these trends to continue. Libraries continue to be a high-value service for many residents, and it is important to note that during times of economic uncertainty, more people begin to turn to the shared resources a public library provides. With an economic impact of $4.05 for every dollar spent on our library, the library is clearly a vital space and resource for everyone living, working, and studying in Barrie.
Now, as we look toward 2023, I just want to highlight a few of the more significant drivers resulting in the small budget increase over last year. The board has determined that the municipal funding required to maintain adequate and effective library service in 2023 is $228,000 over the approved 2022 municipal grant. This is an increase of 2.43%, a modest figure that is below the direction provided to service partners. The board was very pleased to see staff come back with the modest budget when we were able to increase the square footage for libraries for Barrie from 56,000 square feet to over 60,000. Our 2.43% budget increase does not just represent an increase due to inflation, it represents a library system that is tangibly providing more services to the community than it was last year. When we look at this line by line, you can see a small increase in salaries, 2.5%, which accounts for annual step and contractual agreements, as well as a 3.5% increase in the cost of benefits. The library's budget, like everyone else's, is challenged by inflation. The cost of library materials is up 7.66% over last year. However, to keep operational increases low, the library board is supporting the materials budget with a draw from reserves. We are purchasing more digital materials than ever before, and as these tend to cost more than physical materials, an increase to this line ensures we're able to provide the materials that our patrons want. Nearly half of what you see under contracted and other services are funds expensed by the City of Barrie corporate facilities to maintain our spaces. This includes overall facilities maintenance and custodial services. Corporate facilities determines this figure annually with input from library management. This figure also includes the rent payments at our Hawley location. Library management worked with city staff and smart centers to negotiate a lump sum payment for capital improvements at Hawley in 2022, with the remainder added to lease payments over the life of the lease. The lump sum payment towards capital improvements was funded by the library. We have found savings in the budget in a number of areas, including a 30% reduction in consulting and professional services for the year. We also expect to see an increase in revenue for room rentals and printing as we increase access to bookable meeting rooms and as patron use continues to increase back to pre-pandemic levels. The library also continues to bring in revenue from the Township of Oro-Medonte as they contract our library for services. This is a high-level overview on the slide, and we're happy to come back to provide further details at the end of the presentation. As we mentioned earlier, community outreach continues to be a focus for the library in 2023. Building on the success of BPL on the Go, our mobile outreach vehicle, we will be adding additional eye-catching and accessible service in the form of a book bike. Our offering pop-up library spaces in underserved areas of the city will provide equitable service delivery, engage new members, connect with those that are marginalized, promote our physical and digital collections and resources, and increase our memberships. The book bike will be a prominent figure beginning this summer on Barrie's waterfront. These and other outreach initiatives increase the visibility of the library in the community, bring our resources to our patrons outside of our walls, and reduce barriers to access. BPL on the Go will continue to increase this visibility further and make it easier and more convenient for staff to reach our patrons where they are. We aim to provide inclusive places where ideas can incubate, learning is encouraged, and community building is nurtured. Working with our partners, we are engaging the community to connect them with library services in their neighborhoods and online. As we continue to recover from the pandemic, we are placing a strong focus on supporting those that may need it most and are working with community partners to reach these individuals. For example, later this month, we are partnering with YMCA Simcoe Muskoka and the Barrie Police Service to provide story time to children at the Newcomer Center. The kids will hear stories and songs and learn more about the library and our community, while caregivers can get the support they need uninterrupted. We're also doing what we can to stem the knowledge gap left by the pandemic through a partnership with the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic School Board. With teachers paid by the school board, we're offering free small group tutoring to help kids catch up. This program is available at all 3 locations and has proven to be both beneficial to students and popular with parents. We know it can be hard for those that may be struggling to get the support they need. We continue to work with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Empower Simcoe Housing Support, and the Listening Post to help these organizations reach their clients in a convenient public space. And while they're at the library, they can learn more about all the library offers, such as help for job seekers and information and referrals to other agencies through Information Barrie. These and other partnerships allow residents to discover opportunities for growth and learning and allow the library to leverage the expertise found in our community. While the library is an organization separate from the City of Barrie, we do consider ourselves part of the same team, and we want to do what we can to support the key issues that Council cares about. As an organization that welcomes thousands of people each week, we have an important role to play in supporting community safety. Last fall, as an action coming out of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, we hosted a series of workshops with the Women and Children's Centre of Barrie to provide trauma-informed training for library staff, city staff, and community organizations. By approaching situations from a trauma-informed lens, library staff and community members who work with the public are more able to de-escalate situations and help individuals find the resources they need to succeed. The library is also well positioned to support Council's priority to build a thriving community. Every day we provide programs that support the city's arts and culture, and we continue to build on this as we expand our offerings into new neighborhoods and partner with new organizations. On the next slide, we'll talk about how we are also supporting a vibrant downtown. And while we can't help fix the roads or build affordable housing, we believe we can support Council's goal to provide responsible governance. We have a strong library board that values financial oversight, advocacy, and is focused on providing an exceptional service to residents. The board is well-rounded, with individuals bringing a wealth of professional expertise who can always be counted on to ask the right questions. We wish you all the best as you work toward your priorities that you've identified. We are very proud of the progress we made in 2022 towards our goals. This year, we are focused on planning for the future. The library's master facilities plan was created in 2018 through partnership with the city. I won't get into too many details tonight, but the overall theme of the plan is that the library is under-resourced for space and that the space we have, especially downtown, could be used more effectively. One item in the plan was a library in Holly, done. We also refreshed the layout of our Painswick location in 2021 with shelving and furniture that makes the space more flexible for programming and easier for patrons to browse. If you haven't been in Painswick lately, I recommend you check it out. It's a really great space. What's left is a strong need for library space in the city's north end. We are also looking forward to working with the city to build a library in both the Hewitt and Salem recreation centers on the south end. The plan also includes a detailed plan to refresh the downtown library. With growth in progress and more to come in the city's downtown, it is more important than ever that the space be set up to support our community. The library board and staff need time to discuss how to implement a refresh at the downtown library, but ultimately what we're planning is for a modern, well-equipped, and flexible space that we believe is key to a vibrant downtown that people want to call home. Later this year, we may be able to provide a cost estimate and timeline for this project. We have had such a positive community response to our refreshed spaces at Painswick and our new space in Holly that we're really looking forward to the impact that this work will have. Public libraries encourage human connection, inspire community participation, and shape the way people interact. As we continue to improve our programs, services, and access, we are bolstering the social infrastructure of our city, leading to a more resilient and happy community. The library supports individuals to grow and achieve their potential, entertains and educates through our programming, provides no-cost access to reference services and technology, fosters civic engagement, provides a safe place for gathering or independent activity, and provides access to growth opportunities for everyone. These services are vital to the City of Barrie and contribute to our success as a community. At the library, we are consistently working to ensure more people can discover opportunities inside and outside our walls. We appreciate Council's continued support. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the presentation this evening, Lauren and Austin, and it was great to have the opportunity to sit down with you a couple of weeks ago, I guess, where I was nursing what I thought was a sprained foot and is actually a broken one. So we'll see where that goes. But I really do thank you for your presentation this evening. I'd like to open up to members of council. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you for your presentation. Obviously, you did highlight the new Holly branch, and I know it has been quite a success, and obviously I think it might be a new model to be moving forward with, because it seemed to be a very cost-effective way to open up a new branch without it costing $8 to $15 million on a capital side of things. One thing that I just wanted a little bit of clarity from, and I don't know if I misheard you, you mentioned that the Holly Library was funded by the library. Now, it's my understanding that the capital side of it was funded by reserves that the city had, so I'm just wondering if I could get some clarity on that.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. The capital for Holly was funded from library reserves. So like our shelving and furniture and the things that we purchased for Holly's capital was funded by the library's reserves.
Just a follow-up, if I could maybe get Mr. Miller to clarify that, because my understanding was this reserve was actually a city reserve and not a library-controlled reserve.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. So the Holly branch is a leased facility, so the leasing costs are paid from the city's, I believe, primarily development charge reserve. The library has their own reserve that, as that was just described, that was used to purchase some shelvings in the branch. I believe there was some additional money held back in last year's operating budget that went towards some of the capital costs, but I can certainly provide clarity and report back to council.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It was obviously it was a development charge piece of it that I was thinking of, and that's maybe where there's a little bit of muddiness as to the dialogue around that. But I'll leave that alone for now. Now, when it comes to your year over year, when it comes to library materials and programs, now in 2022, you show just a crack over 1.4, and it's basically almost dollar for dollar. In 23. Now, I know one of the bigger projects that you guys did in 22, I believe, was refurbishing the Painswick location. Just kind of curious, when it comes to the library, that particular line, is that what that type of allocation would be for replenishing that Painswick, along with, I know there's been some discussion, and you highlighted it again tonight, about a refresh for the downtown branch.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. Sorry, Councillor Harvey, could you repeat the first part for me?
Yeah, so essentially what I'm looking for is some clarity on that line that says library materials and programs, as to outside of, let's say, books, whether it's e-books, physical books, whatever the case may be, is that the same allocation line that would have covered, let's say, the cost for refurbishing Painswick when it came to changing out the shelving and that?
I see, sorry. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. No, so the line there is what we use to operate, so our collections that we purchase every year, so we're buying new books, new physical items, new e-books, we're funding our programs. That 1.4, that's what it costs per year to do that. So Painswick's cost would have been separate from that. and that did come from a library reserve.
Okay, great, thanks. And just one follow-up to get a little bit of clarity, because obviously I know we do contract, or you guys contract out the library services to Oro Medonte. How is their share determined? I can see that it very moderately has gone up year over year, like $5,000 type of deal. But when I start doing some quick math on my end, when I look at the population basis per se, it seems like if you look at it from a cost per population, Barrie residents are paying significantly more than Oro Medonte residents.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Harvey. The contract for Oro does go up 3% per year. And it's funny, Oro has contracts with a number of municipalities, and they all seem to be developed a little differently. I wasn't part of that when it was put together. It's been in place for quite some time. And so that's how it's calculated, is it just goes up a percentage every year, and every few years the library board may negotiate that with Oro to increase that amount, but it's been at 3% for a number of years now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to kind of highlight it because I think it's something that the board needs to look at to see whether or not they're actually paying their fair share. Now, obviously, people that would live in the north part of Oro Medonte, I can't imagine they're going to be coming down to Barrie to use their services and probably have an agreement with the Aurelia Library, let's say. But I think it's definitely something that we need to look at as to how many active cards we have that are on the Oro side of things in relation to people from Barrie that are using it. Just so that way, obviously, we want to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share when it comes to that. But again, that's something that your board needs to work out. Thank you for your time, and thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Reitman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the things that the library does. And I think I should point out that one of the things that you can do at the library is you can, in fact, get a book. So, but I wanted to sort of point to one of the areas where I think you are doing something, but I'd like to have some more information about it. And that is, we have quite a number of international students, and we have, of course, a growing number of new immigrants coming to the city. And I'm just wondering what the library is. Do you have programming for that? What kind of things do you do there?
Sure, through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Reitma. We do have a program for newcomers called the English Conversation Circle. It's been a little slower since the pandemic, but we're working on picking that up again. And as we mentioned in the presentation, we do have a partnership with the Settlement Office, the Newcomer Center, sorry, and the YMCA Simcoe Muskoka. For a while there, we did have the settlement workers coming into the library, and we're looking at how we can best leverage that again. In terms of the college, I might have to get back to you on that in terms of what we actually are doing with international students at the college. I would guess it's something, but off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but I will get back to you on that.
And through you, Mayor Nuttall, just to elaborate on one thing there, the board in this past term, one of the things the board did was change the membership policy so that if you work, live, or study in Barrie, you can have a library card. So that's one of the ways that we've reduced any barriers to any students at Georgian to make sure they definitely have access to library services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reitman. I'll now ask Councillor Kungle, who's got some questions.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and to Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Jessup. For me, ever impressive about how you actually it's hard, right, to put kind of evidence to all the things that you're doing around how truly open the library has been. And so I do want to applaud you, and I see a lot of members of your team in the audience. And so I know, walking through any door or meeting you in any park, there's a vibrancy around really, truly exhibiting a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I really want to applaud you, and it shows through this presentation about how social infrastructure isn't just about four walls, and you've done that very well. I do want to ask a little bit just around the mindfulness of the budget, because you have also brought a lot of ways in which you've reduced income, and I would say through canceling, I believe, which is still in effect, your member fees for any late books. So if a book is late, no one will be charged, no one is kind of, penalized from, forgetting or not finding or saying the dog ate my book, which I think I might have said a couple of times in my past as a youth. So to that effect, I'm lovely to see this budget come in at the percentage it's at and the focus you have on maintenance while you're also counting that and how you're adding a book bike, which is awesome. But I wanted to ask, though you're not changing that now, and this budget is coming pretty on par, you're forecasting costs when you talk about future capital developments and other pieces where you might be bringing back in fees, or is that a principle or a very firm position where you're actually continuing to make sure that that is not something that you're going to kind of bring back to cover costs?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Kungle, no plans to bring back late fees. Throughout North America, especially in the last couple of years, there have been many libraries who have gone the same route as us. And the reason is that fines are a barrier to access. So there's no plans to put that back. If it came to a point of that crunch, then we would find somewhere else to find those funds. Because it does make a big difference for a lot of people. There's a lot of people, you hear they don't borrow because they're afraid it's going to be late and then they can't pay the fee. And we want to be as open to all as we can. So that barrier is really important to not have in place.
That's great. And from a strategy, as we were talking about Oro, are there other bordering municipalities, or would you even, because you're just so effective at being online, like is the way in which libraries are accessible outside of, I think, Austin, as you mentioned, if you work or live or kind of are connected to Barrie in some way, even as a student, you've got access. And so are there different revenue opportunities for you as you look ahead where you might be strategically connecting with other municipalities we may not be aware of, or are our bordering municipalities well serviced through different library systems?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councillor Kungle. So the Libraries Act does spell out how this has to work.
Okay.
So we can have a contract with Oro Medonte only because they don't have their own library. And so in terms of our revenue source, that's the only one that there is. There are, of course, other municipalities around us that have well-positioned libraries, and in those cases, we could put reciprocal agreements in place with them where, their patrons can borrow our materials and vice versa, but it doesn't generate revenue.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess last question, are there any other services that you didn't mention but that have changed, or did you remove any services as you're going forward and are actually doing a lot of work out in the community? Has that changed what you're actually offering in the doors of your formal libraries?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Kungle, I would say we're trying to do more all the time. That even though we're doing more outreach in the community, we're also adding things inside our spaces as well. So, there are things that we're tweaking, like our one-on-one tech coaches. So looking at our creative spaces that you've maybe seen at downtown, where we have the Glowforge and the Cricut and all of those creative activities where you can sit down with a staff member and they will happily show you, work through a project with you and give you a hand so that, learning together and working on that stuff. So we're tweaking things like that. The one thing that we are doing that I maybe briefly mentioned in the presentation is we are opening up more meeting rooms, especially downtown. So throughout the pandemic, we now have a few more staff who are working remotely, and we're able to free up some office space and give that back to the public. So there's a little revenue generating thing there, in that we will have more spaces that are available to book for the public in terms of meeting rooms. But so that's an additional service, I guess. And I do hope everyone checks out our Library of Things. We're adding to that all the time. And there's some really interesting things there. So yes, you can get a book, but you can also get snowshoes and, dementia support kit and, all of these things that people can borrow. So,
yeah. Well done. I had no questions, but I'm happy that you had the opportunity to share a bit more with me about, some of the value add aspects. So for me, this is a value add budget, and I think we are very fortunate to be having the progressive approach that you have brought both for COVID, but also as we're back out into community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall, thank you again for the presentation and giving us that overview. Just a comment and then a question. My comment here is just looking at the expense line, and again, similar to what my other colleagues have said here, the library materials and programs is stagnant pretty much from 2022 to 2023. So the 2.43% increase that's being requested for is, I guess the perception is it's not going towards additional materials or expansion of programs, it's going to salaries and benefits and contracted services, which I think is just tougher when you talk to taxpayers, and it's always we're paying more, what more are we going to get? So just a comment there. It would also have been really nice to see, I think we had a lot of questions about what programs you're offering. It would have been great to, and maybe in future, and I'm sure I can research this as well on your website, but what the priority programs are for this next year in relation to your strategic plan. I think that would be insightful for us to have access to be able to share to our residents as well. And my question's actually in regards to such program. I know there's been a lot of success across other municipalities with a community fridge, and I know Newmarket has one that was spearheaded by the library board there. I know in Barrie, our community fridge was, we had one that was just opened by an individual and it closed down in November. I wasn't sure if your board had had any discussion in terms of launching a community fridge in the downtown location.
Sure, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton. The library board hasn't discussed it, but as a staff, we have been talking about not necessarily a fridge, but a pantry. But for sure, that is something that we can discuss. And I know you're right. There are lots of examples where that does well. The one aspect that I have been told by my colleagues is it needs to be accessible. Like it needs to be available all the time. Yep. So having something that is inside a building can be problematic, but obviously the hours that we're open is better than nothing. So something to look at for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Newmarket, I think, would be a great site to visit and get some learnings from them as well.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And just through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton, I also wanted to just clarify, although the board did a lot of work to try to make sure that material and program line didn't see significant increases, but I also wanted to mention, of course, we have Holly. We have a third branch this year that opened last year, so that's also part of that increase is the actual rent payments for Holly now.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Austin. Just to confirm that what you're saying is the annualization of those staffing costs in 2023 that were only partial perhaps in 2022, is that correct?
I mean the actual physical location is what I'm referring to, the actual building rent costs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to the presenters, and thank you, Ms. Jessup and Mr. Mitchell. Exciting year, obviously, in 2022 for the library with the opening of the Holly branch and also addition of kiosks. I know we experienced a kiosk being placed in Allendale Rec Center. So just curious, and in recognizing, the library event outreach program, the kiosks, the increase in digital content, and even having smaller sites like Holly, is the future of the library to have smaller sites or different applications than, like is it a hub and spoke model? We have the big library downtown and we have smaller, more easily accessible, using technology, using outreach to provide library services than big building structures. And it's kind of prefaced, we had infrastructure and community investment meeting earlier and the pressures around our capital plan and our costs for our city. So just wondering if you can give us a bit of a sense, the 2023 budget, but as it looks to the future of libraries and how that can be cost effective and also to improve the reach to people.
Through your, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris, the board has been very pleased with how Holly has worked out so far last year. It was kind of, it was a pivot for the board and management for sure to switch to that model and see how it would work, but we're very happy so far with how that boutique space is how management kind of sold it to the board, and we're very happy with how it's working, and we could see that going forward as potential options. Of course, the co-locating with rec centers is also a huge benefit to libraries and to recreation centers. Having them, that's kind of in between. It's not a big standalone building, but it's also not a really small boutique. So we can definitely see a hybrid of having these boutique spaces and then having those shared spaces in rec centers as working out really well. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, I guess the thing is that the Holly is amazing in a built-up area, right, where there's not a lot of space for development. That model is working great because there's so many people around that area already. So I would say if we were looking at the north end of Barrie, a boutique model like that would be great, where we can put a library in an existing space. I do still think, though, that the library co-located with the rec center at Hewitt and in Salem, as is in the plan, is great for us. It's the space would be built for the purpose that we would need it for, right? So, and I don't foresee that each library is going to be the same, right? So, if we're looking at a library in Hewitt, we might look at things that we could build there that we can't offer in our other facilities. So, there's things like podcast studio, that sort of thing that you might want to build into a facility when you're able to create it in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting. The last comment made me think about so what does the library, what is it for a community? And I wouldn't have envisioned a podcast studio, but then that might suggest my connection to technology is not what it should be. But so thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think, obviously glad to hear you talk about other areas that don't have a rec center. How would they get library services or be closer to having library services? I know for Deputy Mayor Thompson, he won't have a beach in Ward 5. And never say never, maybe, but he might get a library, is what you're saying. So that's a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Harris. Councilor Morales.
I'll be quick, Mayor Nettle. I wasn't going to say anything, but Councilor Harris's question kind of inspired a question. I'm a little hesitant about capital investments in the downtown branch as per the budget, as per the capital plan, just because I personally, I'm going to speak for myself, I envision that hub model where there's more branches. You guys have been so successful with the Holly example, and leave the rec centers aside, whether they do happen with the library component. We'll leave the south end aside. I think bringing the library services to where the people are, instead of having an over-centralized location. I'm not saying it's not effective, but it's just, in my opinion, very over-centralized, lots of space to heat and cool and keep hydro for. Whereas this kind of plaza model, I'm sure there's a better word for that, but it might be really effective with something, let's say, at the Eastview Arena Plaza on Johnson Steele. Something really effective on Livingston East or West for Ward 3s and 4s, Letitia Heights Plaza. So, at what point, here's the question, at what point does the library board make the decision, or at what point does even council give the directive to say, wean away from the downtown branch and break them apart? And everybody's always scared because, I could see it in your face, Ms. Jess, if you're like, don't take away my downtown library. But it's not taking it away. It's just, what's the next evolution of library services? And I know there's many risks, in people's minds that, it doesn't actually materialize into branches. But at what point does the library board or council give the directive to wean off, let's say, a downtown location and start spreading the resource deployment?
Through you, Mayor Nettle, to Councilor Morales, I can't really answer that, I guess, except to say that I do still think that the downtown library is a great model. It's where the bulk of our collection lives. So yes, we have delivery that brings the items that people request from downtown to Painswick and Holly and any future branches that we would have, but the bulk of the collection does live there. And so it does need the space for that, as well as it has the most and the largest meeting rooms. So meeting rooms have become, since we've been back, a little bit more from the pandemic, meeting rooms have been really popular. So the community is looking for those spaces where they can meet as a group and meet inexpensively as a group. So they're using those spaces. If you come through at any given time, like the tables and chairs downtown are often quite full with people working and studying and reading and using the computers. I do still think that the downtown library is effective, and that as more growth happens in the downtown, we are looking at that model that is more similar to Holly and Painswick, where people do live near this library, right? Even across the street. from the library is currently vacant, but it is slated to be built up into a housing development. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'll repurpose this question for staff. Ms. McAlpine, who makes the decision? From a not like a yes or no, just from a technical perspective, who makes that decision? Is that the library board? Is that a combination of staff and council?
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Morales. Typically, the library board would present its strategic plan and that and visions related to future library. Any particular facility space actually comes forward to the city. I would be neglectful if I didn't remind people that that is a city building, the downtown space. It's not a building that's at an age that we would be looking to downsize it physically. It certainly still has significant lifespan, while its modifications inside of it may be beneficial to its operations. It's not an effective use of taxpayer dollars to consider downsizing that library. But I would see the library board presenting their vision for the future and their space requirements, and then those requests coming to council in terms of new facilities or significant changes to facilities outside of renewal works.
Okay, and in a hypothetical situation where maybe council had a different opinion on, again, plaza branches, I'm sorry, I'm sure there's a better term for it, that boutique, there we go, boutique branches versus what the library board would propose in this hypothetical, just so I can understand how alignment works. Who makes the final decision and how does that happen?
Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Morales. The direction could come from City Council requesting the board to consider that and have the board report back on its feedback regarding that particular request. That's certainly an option that council can present should it wish.
Thank you.
And through your, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Morales, just as to speak on behalf of the board for a moment, I just wanted to mention that the board does consider all the branches kind of together and how the best use of the space and the best way to provide library services to the community. So we are always thinking about the most effective and efficient and flexible use of a space like downtown to make sure it works the best in the entire library system. And we don't just focus on having a downtown branch the same way it's always been. We do really focus on that flexibility and evolving the service for sure. So just so you're aware that the board does have that in mind.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. Councilor Corser?
I guess it's just a comment more than it is a question. I use the library with my son all the time. I had the pleasure of visiting the Painswick Library for the first time just recently, and it was a busy, busy hub. And as you stated before in your presentation, that as you build these new satellite libraries, it's not that you're drawing from other places in the city, you're actually engaging people that are actually surrounding the library hub in itself. So that's exciting. And I've heard the phrase strollerable to Holly, where you have the Piggy Hill Center, you have a grocery store, you have a public school, elementary school in the area, and it's strollerable for a mother or father or parent to be able to bring their kids to all the things in one afternoon. And I think that's just a brilliant idea for people who are of lower income or just for walkable communities and all the things. Also to rah-rah the downtown, my son, 8, he is just thrilled about cracking open that 3D printer and all the things that are in the little section you have there, excuse me. I think that it probably would not be absolutely cost effective to be able to replicate what you have in the downtown with all the other hubs that you have outside of the downtown core. I love the building, and I just think you guys do an incredible job. And as Councillor Ritma said, and you can still get a book. Yeah. It's just incredible. And like the robotics, the little robots the kids get to program and play with, to the crafts, to all the things on top of books. I think you guys do an excellent job, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Councillor Dipsari, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Thanks for the presentation. Just a quick question on the other fees grants. Is that the portion of the Oro Medonte agreement? How much of that 600 is theirs?
I wrote it down. Where? Oros? Sorry, did put it somewhere, but now I can't find it, of course. Sorry. Deputy Mayor Thompson, that amount, I'm going to double check for you, but I want to say it's about 300,000.
Okay, so it's pretty much half of your revenue or your grants.
There's also a provincial grant included in that number as well.
So probably half provincial and...
It's not half provincial. The provincial portion isn't as large as we and many libraries would like it to be, but it's in there.
Now, further to Councillor Kungo's question about late fees and stuff, and I understand the burden of the late fee and stuff like that, and we had that discussion, I think, 3 years ago, or possibly. Now, the model is if I work in Barrie or, like, there's nobody refused a library card, is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Deputy Mayor Thompson, sorry. No, we don't offer library cards to anyone who comes in. So if you live outside of Barrie and you don't work or study in Barrie, you do have to pay a non-resident fee to use the library. It's $75 for the year, and that lets people use the library as they would a resident in Barrie.
And how many of those do you think you would have?
Not a ton, but I'll find out.
Okay. Yeah. And the reason being is, the service is very important to residents and stuff, right? And the municipality is growing, and with our rec centers and stuff, where we may need to look at a little bit more Barrie, taking care of our residents, for resources and stuff. Like, if you go to the taxpayer and you ask them, to fund the library, when they want to use the resources that you have, like to Councillor Corser's, a 3D printer, if you went in there every time and somebody from out of town had the printer, it's frustrating. And I know that's a very, small thing. So I think that going forward, we may need to look at not offering services to surrounding municipalities and stuff. That way you can justify to your Barrie resident, the actual taxpayer, and the largest, The question that Councilor Morales raised about, downsizing the downtown library, I don't think that's probably in my lifetime, just at the age of the building and stuff. But I have a lot of people, and I'll be honest, residents that, they went into Painswick, beautiful library, very new. A lot of money was spent on bookshelves. And, it's not something like, you put on Kijiji and somebody comes and picks up your bookshelves and you put that towards. And, the purpose is the books, and I understand functionality and for other programming, but, when things are going up, and I know there'll be people probably in the audience and online that's saying, here's a guy that just looked at a $63 million police budget. But in this job, we look at everyone individually, and, you made the point of, team, right? Like, so everything has to be looked at individually. And I just sometimes worry that we're getting in that stage of the use it or lose it budget mentality. Like, we're going to, I've heard from a few councillors moving the upstairs, downstairs, downstairs, upstairs, where I totally disagree with that thought process for other reasons. But it's almost like we're finding ways to spend money in not seeing a great growth in material and programming. You know, like where I'd like to see more money spent in that than a fancy bookshelf, or because if I'm there for the content, I really couldn't care. The book could be on the floor in my world. Like, I'm there for the book, right? And that's the purpose of the library. So that's something I'd like to see. And the one other thing that I have a little bit of trouble in, I will not get into this very publicly, but who triggered your negotiation with staff? Was that the board decision or yourself? When you negotiated with staff?
Sorry.
For the new contract?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Deputy Mayor Thompson. We do have a union at the library, so our union is CUPE. So when it expires, the union triggers negotiations.
And the only reason why I ask is you guys presented a signing bonus to 91 employees, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that actually put the municipality in jeopardy because, you know, normally the way it works is we're the larger, same union. We negotiate, you follow. When you set precedents like that, it actually affected our taxpayers because conversations changed in our negotiations, which, you know, to your point, we're a team, right? So I look at your ask, we'll never be able to actually narrow down the amount that you actually cost the taxpayers in our own contract negotiations. Because if I look at your ask in the budgets and salaries, just here alone, it's 2.73. That's what your increase is from 6.2 to 6.3 and change. If you add your signing bonus, you're almost 4% in this contract, right? So what happens is our members look at that and it sets negotiations and that sets the tone, right? So I didn't want to do this while you were not here when budget deliberations happened and stuff. So I wanted to be forthcoming and, you know, how I felt because I am the steward of people's money sitting here and I have to respect that. And I would just hope that, you know, whatever happens in budget, but going forward, that there's a communications between the library and our team in HR so that this is something that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Deputy Mayor Thompson, I do agree with that. And it was unfortunate that it did pan out that way. And to be honest, that's my fault. And it is something that I will definitely keep in mind going forward because I do realize that it put the city's HR team in a difficult position for sure. I think it was just in the timing where our union triggered our negotiations before the city's, and I don't know if that timing always happens that way or if it was just in the way that it played out. But yeah, we did end up negotiating first this time around.
And just to elaborate, I can't speak directly to any city situations, but I just want to say that the board has, through management and discussions with management, has been very active in those negotiations, and we have a few very strong board members that are experienced in that area. So we do as much as we can to make sure that there's good oversight and that the library is responsible in those situations for sure. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, thank you for your presentation this evening. Sorry, Councillor Harvey, you had to follow up?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor Nuttall. I was just going to, because I know Deputy Mayor Thompson asked about Oro Medante's share. So the latest numbers that were available online in 2019, it was just a crack over 183,000, and then in 2020 they paid 188,662. So it is much less than 300,000. And that's why I kind of highlighted it when I was asking those questions too, because I think they're getting a far better deal than what our residents are for our own library. But I do appreciate some of the questions that were asked. And I guess where I reiterate some of Deputy Mayor Thompson's concerns, and especially from a labor negotiations piece, in the end, the library is funded by the city and the taxpayers. And that's what we really have to kind of reflect on here. Without the funding of the city, there wouldn't be a library. And I'll just leave my comments at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Again, thank you for your presentation this evening. I have the opportunity to use your services weekly. My children constantly tell me that it would be good for me to stay during their hour they spend in there. It's probably true, but I certainly see great benefit. The one thing I would just like to, there's actually two things I'd like to highlight. Number one is about a week and a half ago, there was a funding by the federal government, and I'm not sure who I should be asking this to, so I'm just going to take a guess at starting with CAO Prowse with regards to the federal funding of some upgrades to the outside of the facility downtown. I believe there was about, I don't know, $200,000 or $300,000 that was going down there to help as well. And is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to members of council, I think I would defer to Ms. McAlpine, who oversees facilities, and she probably has the number right on the tip of her tongue.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I don't have the number right on the tip of my tongue, but it is. Don,
that was a classic setting the wrong expectations.
Yeah.
For the CAO.
It was several $100,000 towards that contributed to the work that has been completed at the Edwin Coop Park and in the entranceway to the library, making substantive improvements to access to the building and safety for our patrons.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, members of council. There's also been some upgrades to the outdoors facility. In a hope to both make it more inviting as well as more safe. And I just, the services that you provide for my children, I'm one person. I feel like I have a conflict on the library right now because my kids go there every week. Yeah, well, I'll meet you there, Councillor Corser, okay? And after that, we'll play Minecraft. The reality is that the services that we enjoy there, you know, there's kind of a difference between what my children go and enjoy and potentially social services the library offers. And I think that there's a very fine line to walk there. It needs to be a safe place for families or seniors or children to go, and the efforts that have been made in terms of the outdoors, and you're talking about the indoors, that is paramount. And that's something that I communicated to you, and you communicated back to me when we had the opportunity to meet, and I know that it'll continue to be top of mind going forward. So thank you for your presentation this evening, and certainly look forward to going through the budget process on this.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Before we go into the County of Simcoe, CEO Prowse, I was wondering if you could give an update on the score in the Leaf game this evening. And you're getting that because you set up Don.
And I'll guarantee he doesn't have that on the tip of his tongue.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. As I'm in a meeting with you, I am not aware of what the score is on the Leaf game, but I am also interested. If somebody has the score, I'd love to hear.
1-1. We're going to take a 5-minute break before we continue with the County of Simcoe. The county then will have a 10-minute presentation followed by questions, as we've seen here earlier in this evening. So we'll reconvene at 9 p.m. Thank you. So we're going to call to order. If we could ask the County of Simcoe to approach the mic here and be ready for the presentation. You have 10 minutes for a presentation. I believe there's going to be some questions, but let's see where all this goes.
Thank you very much, Mayor Nuttall, Council. We're very, very pleased to be here in Barrie again, live in person. It's awesome. I am Trevor Wilcox, General Manager of Corporate Performance. With me, I have Mina Fayez-Bey-Agat, who is our GM of Social and Community Services, Jane Sinclair, GM of Health and Emergency Services, and our County Treasurer, Leland Sibic. We'll present a short review of the services provided within the partnership with budget highlights for each of them. And each GM will go through their areas, and then I will provide a review of the financials and summarize that. I wanted to start off in summary that this year's budget was built with the idea of restraint through it. We have reduced where we can reduce. We have deferred where we can defer in alignment with what is happening with our economy and the idea that right now we have to slow down demand related to supply as the Bank of Canada is encouraging all us to do. So this has been prepared with the priority items. Just to review with you, here are the municipal services that we do partner with you to provide. Ontario Works, Children's Services, Community Services, Social Housing, both within our own housing as well as nonprofit, our paramedic services, long-term care, and then there's a small amount of service provided for archives, museum, and also 10% ownership share of the Lake Simcoe Regional Airport. So now I will turn it over to our GMs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall and members of council. My name is Mina Fayez-Bey-Agat, and I'd like to just formally introduce myself. I'm new to the county. This is my 4th week on the job, so thank you for having me. And I'll do my very best to walk us through the service programs we deliver at Social and Community Services.
So you'll be answering all the questions tonight.
I will be answering all questions. Thank you. So at Social and Community Services, we have 4 primary programs. Ontario Works, which is an income and employment support subsidy program. Within this program, there's 3 main components: the income support that's provided for clients, as well as employment supports. The second main component of the Ontario Works program is the life stabilization supports. This is a shift from employment supports. Actually, 2023 will be the last year where we're winding down our employment support efforts that focus on creating jobs for those clients receiving OW, or helping them receive jobs or get jobs through the employment support program. That's going to a larger regional social service manager that the province will announce in the next few weeks. What will happen is our team at Ontario Works will be focusing on life stabilization. This is more focused on the most vulnerable clients that are receiving income subsidy, where we're focusing on the underlying factors that are destabilizing their ability to be job ready or engage into the employment market. So here we have services that are coordinated through community agency, community partners, things that focus around mental health, addiction, other health services, certain emergency income supports around rent, housing retention through rent funds, things of that nature for the life stabilization program. And we've created a team of 6 that will be focused on a team of 6 caseworkers that focuses on life stabilization, with 3 of them being located here in Barrie. And the last component is emergency social services. So this is a role we play where we assist in an emergency response that's a wide and larger emergency. And we coordinate all the social services that are required to address that emergency. And oftentimes that could extend to other regions and neighboring municipalities if there was an evacuation or things of that nature. The second major section of our services is children's services. Here we're the system service manager, again designated by the province as in Ontario Works. And again here there's 3 major components of services we deliver. The first being the early learning and and the child care centers. Here, we are the system manager that coordinates the administration and funding of 200 child care providers. That's a caseload of approximately 10,000 child care spaces across the county, with about 6,000 of them here in Barrie. Additionally, we also look at the needs of those who can't afford childcare at the rates being provided in the private sector. So there's a subsidy program where families can apply for that subsidy. The income testing for that subsidy and the application process is handled and administrated by our team. Again, here there's about 4,200 children being subsidized in childcare right now across the county, and about 1,700 of those children are being subsidized in the city of Barrie. And then finally, we have the early on education and family centers. This is more focused on parental education for children under the age of 6. There's 34 locations across the county, 8 primary centers, and then 26 satellite offices. And again, there's 17 of those locations here at the city of Barrie. The other 2 programs, again, we talked about the child care subsidy, and the last one is the quality assurance and professional development. So rather than going into these 200 child care providers and taking a look at how they do things, we partner and work with them on how to better develop their services and to increase the level of professionalism in the way the service is delivered. This is more focused on creating an equity between 2 sectors. The child care provider sector is actually, there's a pay inequity happening, where those workers in those centers do get paid about $10 less than those that are being paid in the education system or in our school systems. So there's while there's provincial and federal funding and efforts in place to try to equalize that level of pay, a big proponent of being able to retain your staff is to increase their skill sets, and that's really what that quality assurance professional development team is focused on. The other 2 major program areas where we are the system service managers, community services and social housing. So community services is primarily focused on 4 areas. Again, here through the Housing Services Act, we are the service manager for the homelessness services and preventative services. This includes, in homelessness prevention, the coordinated planning and administration of a system that delivers emergency shelters, temporary shelters, transitional housing supports, and also housing help supports and supports to housing after you've found your housing to be able to keep it. Additionally, the county does support through our division the poverty reduction strategy, and here we actually invest in a grant-based program that focuses on issuing about $1.2 million annually to community agencies and partners that are their primary focus is to address issues that are causing poverty in an effort to reduce or end it. This grant is issued towards the end of every year. This year in November, 14 agencies were funded for 16 projects, and another 4 are coming to County Council in 2 weeks to announce and approve the last 4 recipients. Currently, right now, of those recipients that have been already approved, 3 agencies are operating within Barrie, and then hopefully after the announcements are made, we can announce the others that were also successful. In the community development section, as a system service manager here, here we're focused on again, coordinating with other community agencies to deliver unique services. Examples of these services would be supportive housing programs that have opened. Recently in Barrie, we've opened Lucy's Place, which is a 24-unit a motel conversion that offers on-site 24-hour support care to allow people to live independently but receive supports in order to maintain their tenancies. These are often, community development work is primarily focused on a housing first model, a model that looks to measure the acuity and the level of need, clients' need, and prioritizes that so that these services and these supports are offered to those who need it most first, in an effort to reduce or try to end chronic homelessness here at the county. Another example opening up hopefully in the next few months, I'm told, is Tiffin Street, which is another 14-unit supportive housing build that's going to come online this year. And then finally, local immigration partnership, and this is as what it states. It's again us as a system service manager funding a collaborative group of agencies that focus on newcomers and settlers here in the county, primarily focused on increasing and improving outcomes to help newcomers and settlers that choose to settle here in the county to engage economically, socially, and through the community, as well as allows them the opportunity to improve their experience of their resettlement as they've arrived here. The last area is social housing. So we are the system service manager, again, through the Housing Services Act, in two different components of social housing. One is the legacy RGI stock, as we are the sole shareholder of Simcoe County Housing Corporation. This is about 1,600 rent geared to income units, and here in Barrie, it's about 360 units that are here in Barrie. As well as the social housing portfolio. This is the nonprofit sector who we fund to subsidize the units to deliver affordable housing across the county. And again, here, this is about 2,700 units, of which about 60% of them are found here in Barrie. And then finally, our major component and kind of our structural control is the affordable housing strategy, which is a 10-year strategy that focuses on creating more affordable housing, and the homelessness side of that strategy is focused on ending chronic homelessness. And the do play hand in hand, and as you've seen, there's multiple developments in flight as we speak. There's the Aurelia development and the Bradford development, and in this year's budget, you'll see some capital planning funding for the city of Barrie's development that's going to enter its planning and design stage this year. Just really quickly, and I won't go into a lot of detail, I know we're tight on time. Again, so Ontario Works, just to point out here, as I shared, out of the 5,000 caseloads that we're predicting to have this year, there's a reduction in caseload here in the city of Barrie, which is a good indicator. It's down to about 2,000 or 38%. In children's services, again, like I said, we represent about 42% of the child subsidies happening here in the city of Barrie. And in the community services sector, here's kind of an indication of how many shelters are operating in the city of Barrie. So out of the 6 shelters, 4 are operating here. Out of the 7 domiciliary care homes, 2 are operating here. And 1 temporary shelter on Rose Street that we opened last year, and that's currently operating now. And 4 supportive and transitional housing sites. And then again, finally, as I talked about, here's the details of our social and community housing and our social housing portfolio, and some of the factors that are coming into this year's budget, just to point out that there is an increase in insurance costs across the board in the industry across Ontario for social housing and community housing. This was a considerably higher than anticipated cost. It came in about $400,000 or $500,000 more than anticipated, but it was offset by some other increases in federal funding, as well as offset on some of the subsidies and ongoing capital projects that we were able to delay or defer. So that's my part of the presentation. I'll hand it off to my colleague, Jane. Sorry about speaking so fast.
Thank you. I would just remind that there was about 10 minutes, and it's been about 12 minutes, and we haven't got halfway through the presentation. And I think there's going to be a lot of questions probably at the end, so if we can just try to respect the time, that would be great.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I'm Jane Sinclair, General Manager of Health and Emergency Services with the County of Simcoe. I will give you a very brief synopsis of our long-term care services and our paramedic services. We have 4 long-term care homes across the county for a total of 544 long-term care beds. We have approved for an additional 50 beds that we are under construction over the next couple of years to expand 2 of our locations. We have a number of services provided and a number of regional programs from our long-term care homes, including a very new specialized behavioral support transition unit from our home in Penetanguishene, as well as we have a dialysis program from a couple of our long-term care homes, and provide digital support through Ontario Telemedicine to all 26 long-term care homes across the region. Looking at our paramedic services, we have a staff of approximately 400 highly skilled healthcare professionals comprised of both primary and advanced care paramedicine. We have a total of 17 stations across the region, including the Barrie Simcoe Emergency Services Campus. That's been a great success and a great partnership with the City of Barrie. We also have 7 posts in addition to our stations. And last, but certainly not least, we have a growing branch of our service called community paramedicine, and we're very, very pleased. It has 4 different elements you can see on the presentation slide, but I'll just quickly talk about the most recent development. We received funding through the Ministry of Long-Term Care, $8 million over a 4-year period to expand and grow this program. And we're delighted that we've grown this across the region, including within the City of Barrie. Our roster a year ago was approximately 300 patients in this program. We're up over 600 patients. We have 117 in the City of Barrie alone. So some tremendous success and partnerships with this new program. And with that, I'll go right into the budget highlights. So for long-term care, the main highlight that I'll speak to is an increase in frontline staffing. So that's our personal support workers. You may recall the Ministry of Long-Term Care announced a funding initiative to increase the frontline direct care in all long-term care homes across the province. 4-year program. The initiative starts at an average of 3 hours of personal care per resident per day, with the goal to reach an average of 4 over the 4-year period, which will end in 2024. And so we are adding additional staffing hours through this funded initiative. In 2023, this year, we'll have an average across our 4 homes of 3.5 hours of direct care. And overall, the long-term care budget on the operational side is actually seeing a decrease. We're able to now reduce some of our costs related to pandemic-related PPE and additional staffing requirements. So we are seeing a decrease overall in our operations. On the paramedic services side, our main highlights going into 2023 are the addition of some additional resources. We track and trend the number of calls, not only here in the City of Barrie, but across the entire region. We monitor it very closely. In 2022, we saw an increase, unprecedented, of 10.4% call volume increase. And we see a number of factors also impacting, I think, an 8.6% increase in the number of transports to hospital. We're seeing more time during that transfer of care in our local hospitals. I think the average time pre-pandemic was approximately 34 minutes, and it's up to as high as 58 minutes for our partner hospitals across the region. The other highlights that I'll mention, fuel increased costs and insurance costs for paramedic services, and a couple of our capital initiatives. The defibrillators, we're undergoing a 2-year defibrillator replacement, 34 in 2023, and then the same number in 2024. So jumping into the actual, some statistics to give you a sense of our response time, which is obviously a very important metric that we monitor in our calls. You can see overall across the county, estimate at year end of 2022, 78,000 calls. That's that 10.4% I mentioned. You can see within the City of Barrie, approximately 32% of all calls across the region. At 24,000 year end. And then looking at our response time, the good news is we're seeing reductions, so we're getting there quicker. On a regional basis, countywide basis, year end estimate 7 minutes, 48 seconds on average. In the City of Barrie, 6 minutes, 25 seconds on average for the City of Barrie. So with that, I'll turn back to Mr. Wilcox to provide a summary of the financials.
Thank you very much. Just to quickly finish, the way that we manage the service is total, and it's allocated based upon a cost-sharing methodology. It's either weighted based upon taxable assessment or caseload, and it depends upon the kind of services as outlined in the table here. In terms of the services themselves, this table provides an overview of the total service. And you can see that overall we've got an increase, an operating increase of 1.9%. So this is the shared between the cities of Barrie, Orillia, and the county of Simcoe. This is the total cost municipally that we have to provide beyond any funding that we get from the province. In terms of then applying the allocation methodology, we do that with the city of Barrie, and that actually has lowered the operating increase this year because some of the weightings are a little bit less than they were in the prior year. Total OPEX operating requirement increase is 1.6% for 2023. Just turning to capital, I won't go through the long list here, but we have provided a list of the various projects. We divide that into two different categories: major facilities capital projects and non-major facility capital projects, because we treat the major facility capital projects a little bit special. We add those together, and they are in the various categories of paramedics, social housing, and long-term care. They're allocated based upon the allocation methodology, and you can see the total capital before any adjustment is $13.4 million. We do adjust that for the major facility capital because we take those and we apply a 10-year allocation methodology to that. So we spread that across 10 years, and we add that to the previous year's major facility capital project. So that diminishes the increase. It's meant to try and smooth out the bumps along the way. Very technical term, capital is often lumpy, so that tries to allocate that. And the bottom line is the adjusted capital of $8.6 million. Again, I won't go through the details here, but this is provided to you to show you where all of the costs are coming from and the budget adjustments that we made along the way. You can see it still has the operating impact and then the total adjusted capital in there as well. So the major thing that's driving the cost increase this year is the capital, basically because of the main facilities that we are embarking on, especially in social housing at this time. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Thank you to your team for your presentation this evening. And I'm going to start with some questions from myself, if that's okay. Which are going to require me to have glasses on right now because it's late and dark. With regards to social housing, and I guess the question I'm perhaps going to Mr. Miller, so I apologize if it's back and forth. With regards to social housing, we're seeing, Mr. Wilcox, there's an investment in Orillia, Midland, Barrie. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
and what's the total capital investment in those three facilities?
For 2023?
Overall, all three, over the next 5 years.
I don't have that figure at hand, but maybe Leland does. Sorry. So 180 to 200 million.
Okay, so let's use 200 as a round figure.
Yeah.
Does that include the debenture costs associated, or is this all coming from reserve?
That is capital cost.
So no debenture costs included? Okay, so that 200's through the life cycle of the actual debt, that 200 is a much larger figure. There's going to be a significant investment in Barrie. In terms of
half of that will be in Barrie.
Half of that will be in Barrie. And so that's a good news story, I believe, for the citizens of Barrie. Mr. Miller, our contribution to social housing in Simcoe County is what percentage? Mr. Wilcox.
It's through the allocation methodology, it's 25.2%.
25.2%. So we're going to fund 25.2% and receive 50% of the value. That's a good news story. Mr. Miller, when we're I know this is him this time. Mr. Miller, when we're collecting DCs, and I did not know this, so I don't want to pretend like this is something that I learned when I was on the previous councils I served on. When we're collecting DCs, I believe one of the items that we collect on is social housing. Is that correct?
Mayor Nettle, that is correct. We base that information from the county's DC study, and we update ours. So there are some costs that are attributable to social housing, yes.
Okay. And the MFCs, to use your language, are they funded out of this joint capital reserve or the special Simcoe account? Okay, Mr. Miller.
So through you, Mayor Nettle, so the way the city has funded the county's capital is the city created a county capital reserve a number of years ago, and really it was just to smooth the year-to-year changes. So we put money in, and the MFC payments come out of that reserve. In addition to that, up to this year, there was a portion of those costs are funded from development charges. Not all of them, but there's a portion that we do fund from development charges that we take out from that reserve. And that's with the changes of Bill 23, we will now have to fund those DC costs from our county capital reserve going forward.
Okay. So, Mr. Wilcox, how many social housing developments have been built over the past decade?
There were 3 other ones. There was one in Collingwood, one in Tay, and one in Wasaga Beach.
For a value of guesstimated?
Those are smaller, so I would guess 50, 60, sorry? 100 million.
$100 million, okay. So over the last number of years, as long as we've had development charges in place, which I believe goes back into the either late 90s or early 2000s, we've been collecting on social housing. We're about to have a $100 million facility built here in the city of Barrie. We're about to be on the hook for $50 million out of a $200 million build in the county of Simcoe. That tells me that over the next 5 years, there should be $50 million in DCs transferred over to the county of Simcoe to support that social housing. Yes, Mr. Miller, yeah.
Team Mayor Nettle, it's not totally, it's not 50 million. It's a lower number. I'm going to, at this point, tell you it's, I think in the neighborhood that we had in our previous background study was around 14 million over the next, I think, 10 years. We haven't quite caught up to the county's DC study. That's what we'll be doing this year, but currently that's what we have on the books. So I would say a range of perhaps 14 to 25 million at this point might be the number we won't be able to fund from DCs anymore.
So there's 14 to 25 that's sitting inside of the DC reserve per se, prior to Bill 23 for social housing.
So it's not actually collected, but forecasted to be used from DCs as we collected them, yes. We don't have the cash today, but in theory, before Bill 23, we would have collected that from development charges, which we no longer can.
But what was collected in the past? And did that go, like, I guess my whole point here is that we have a significant capital program from the county. And that is a, look, I grew up in social housing here in the city of Barrie. There's nobody who's a bigger fan of it. I gotta be terribly blunt with you on that. But there's a significant capital program which I've recently understood that the development charges would be responsible for over the past 20 years of development charges. We haven't seen the development of social housing here, at least in the city of Barrie. There has been some in some other places around the county, but we haven't seen that here in the city of Barrie. But we've collected DCs over that time period for social housing. Now we have the capital plan coming up, very sizable. And I guess what I'm hearing is that we don't have any DC money available to cover that. And the result to me, and the net result to me, as I look at the budget going forth, is that between the tax capital reserve and the operating, the operating budget, it'll essentially end up funding the social housing requests that are coming from the county. Is that?
Correct, and we'll call it the county capital reserve, which is funded from taxes, so correct.
Right. But we've been collecting DCs for 20 years that should have had the social housing in the background, and we haven't seen that. So now we're in a time period where there's a change, a regulatory change happening from the provincial level, and that regulatory change is leaving us in a position where there's a $50 million liability, of which we were guessing we would be able to recoup between 14 and 25 million, based on the answers this evening. But that's actually zero, right?
So, sorry, Mayor Lehman. So it's zero from the
DC.
Right, going forward, it's zero.
It's zero.
Yes.
It's zero. Yes. So there's let's push all of our Bill 23 ideas and adjustments to the side for a second. There's a $50 million social housing liability. We're not touching anything else the county's doing right now. There's a $50 million social housing liability here in the city of Barrie, which until Bill 23 should have been covered through DC charges. Is that correct?
Portion of it, correct.
Portion, is it it's 90%? Because I remember it being 90% of the cost over the previous 10 years, and so it averaged out to, no, it's not.
It's not, it's a lot lower than 90%. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but from memory, it was around, like right now we had 14 million in our financial forecast. As I say, that number's probably a little on the low side because we haven't updated our DC studies. So that's why I say it's a range of 14 to 25, probably.
So 40 to 50 in the end?
From DCs, no, I'd say 14 to 25 over a 10-year forward-looking period.
That's million though, before
million.
So 40 to 50% of it, we could go into DCs.
Sure, for now. I mean, we can come back to you with kind of what the actual average percentage is, but for now, that's probably a reasonable estimate.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I have to be fair to Mr. Miller because I didn't prep him with any of those questions, Member Council, and I have now done what I asked you not to do. So I must admit to my wrong in public. So moving over to the county, I assume you're about to go through the same issue.
Mayor Nuttall, yes. I want to add one little small part. There are a bunch of single unit facilities that we have within the city of Barrie that we're going to be selling to convert to this large development. It's worth about $30 million. So that's why it's not quite fitting with the numbers. Barrie will benefit 25% of that too.
So we benefit on $7.5 million out of that. Yeah. Okay, perfect. All of this to say, there's a massive liability when it comes to social housing. There's a liability in terms of the amount of people that are on a wait list. I don't even want to know what the wait list is anymore. Like I don't, because it actually, that's the type of stuff that keeps me up at night. And then there's a huge liability to fund it. And we as a council, we're, the county and the city get to work together. Sometimes that relationship's great, sometimes that relationship isn't. But where we need to raise a common banner here is on the funding of social housing. Is there any sort of county plan in terms of speaking to, lobbying the provincial government on social housing? You're responsible for this. We essentially contract you out because the province tells us we have to contract you out for that, and maybe we would anyways. And at this point, it's now defunded. Is there a plan from the county?
Sure, Mayor Nuttall. There was a report brought to council this week on Bill 23 specifically. It's the second one that came forward. And there was a motion to, I wouldn't say lobby, but to go to the province to ask for clarification in terms of how we can advance things. I know through other aspects, through AMO itself as well, we're asked for clarification. The county itself is actually negative in our DCs for social housing specifically. We have $25 million that we've already put out in cost that we were counting on DCs to come back for. That is still up in the air as far as where that's going to come from. And I understand where you're coming from, but it's so new that we haven't really decided through county council whether this is going to affect these specific developments. It could delay them, it could scale them, rescale them, it could affect them in other ways, but you are correct in terms of the numbers that we have on the table and the plans that are in place.
So we as a council have been given your budget, and at the same time as being given your budget, there's a defunding that's taking place, and I think we need to recognize that as a council. I am naturally opposed to the increases that come from the County of Simcoe. I have to be honest with you. This specific item with relation to the capital expenditures, and specifically on social housing, but the capital expenditures at large, I think there's a huge liability there, and I don't believe that it's your fault. I think you're bringing forth good opportunities for people who need it, both in the city of Barrie and throughout. Okay, so that's my padding before long-term care. Okay, and long-term care is a huge concern, and I guess I have a blanket question, is like, what are we going to do about it? Whether, I asked on a phone call meeting or Zoom meeting, whatever we were on, there was a question about beds and funding. And so we're $6.6 million in the funding request from the county in this budget. That $6.6 million is either across, in my conversations with former Deputy Mayor Barrie Ward, it was 10 people. I think on the call that day it was answered there was 18 on record, Councillor Hamilton, yeah? And so it's either $660,000 per person or $360,000 per person. Either way, it's an astronomical amount of money, and we don't offer any of those services here in the city of Barrie. What are we going to do to fix that? That's my question.
Thank you for that question. We're always open to partnership and discussions with the City of Barrie about all of our services. We've had some preliminary discussion about long-term care. Long-term care is part of a bigger cost-sharing agreement, obviously, with the City of Barrie. So there's paramedic services, there's housing, Ontario Works, et cetera. And they're all different. The cost-sharing agreements are different. Long-term care, for example, is a different blend than paramedic services. In some areas, paramedic services, I'll use that for an example, the cost share is 25%, but the actual call, the service delivery is 32%. So we actually provide more service to the City of Barrie than proportionally with the other municipalities as part of this, this entire service delivery program. So they are all a little bit different. Long-term care has had lower numbers, of course, as well. On top of it, with the pandemic, the last few years, we've seen all long-term care homes across the region with beds staying open and not being able to fill related to COVID precautions, et cetera. So our numbers have decreased as a relation to that. I think the latest is, I think in the budget we've projected 19 beds across our 4 sites, and I think our full year forecast is around 15 for 2022. But so twofold, when we look at all of the services we deliver, they're all have different cost sharing implications for the City of Barrie, with long-term care, there is a smaller caseload than, say, in Ontario Works or social housing, et cetera. But going forward, we are more than happy to talk to continue our discussions with staff from the City of Barrie about our partnership around long-term care and how we can continue to provide this service and are certainly open to thoughts, suggestions, and opportunities for partnership going forward. So we look forward to those continued discussions with your staff on the long-term care piece.
Thank you for that response, and it just so happens the opportunity is coming up with regards to Victoria Village. So I hope that our staff and the county and Vic Village can find a way to make that work. But there needs to be a footprint here. There just has to be. Sorry, Mr. Pope.
May I, just wanted to correct one number. I know you said it was 6 point something million.
I think 6.6.
We did adjust that. The capital requirement for 2023 dropped significantly because of most projects, they are not going to be delivered early. They get delayed. The ask this year is 1.7 million for that specific amount for long-term care. So it has dropped.
It has dropped significantly.
But
Okay.
that project is ongoing, so there is.
And then it'll happen next year.
There's future commitments that will end up coming to.
And was this related to yesterday's meeting of the county where there was a reduction overall? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Now I see where those things came together. Thank you. Members of council, questions? Councillor Kunkel.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you for the presentation. It's, I'm coming with a bit more background because I've had the privilege of being on Simcoe County Council as representative. So my questions, and let me know if they're more takeaway ones, but they relate to the budget a little bit separate than what was presented, unless it's embedded and I haven't seen it. But I was thinking through items that I'm assuming, I'm forecasting, typically have come up in conversations between City of Barrie and County of Simcoe. And two in particular have been around the work towards getting rapid housing, RHI funding from the feds, and then warming centers. And so I know there's parts of that in the presentation, but perhaps for the benefit of who might be the best to respond, I'll start with warming centers. Thank you. And congratulations on your new role with County of Simcoe.
Thank you.
With respects to warming centers, and I'm not going to ask you for firm numbers in general, but it might just be more of an awareness of what's being planned here. So I'm seeing $100,000 identified in the budget for warming centers. And I know that in year there was quite a bit of conversation between the City of Barrie and bringing forward to County Council an ask to meet us within the formula. So we put money on the table and then said, we would like you to not only match the money, but match the formula. So, I mean, that did create an unexpected amount of pull. And I know in general at a community level, there's ongoing conversations, and I believe in the past educational presentation by County of Simcoe, we maybe skirted around it a little bit because we've seen the Rose development occur, and some of the questions around operating and hours of operation, I think form some information about gaps still in community that we're hearing about. So we know that we've been asked in the past from our community to support funding warming centers, which we don't do. And then I believe, in my opinion, we get into these circular conversations. County of Simcoe is also not formally funded for warming centers. So knowing there's no mandate around this, it still becomes a funding ask out of urgent, I would say, needs, especially in the winter. So could you talk to me more about how that $100,000 was informed? Do you think it's actually going to meet the needs that we have seen and have funded, but haven't planned for, I would say, within budgets formally? And is that allocated to support certain communities in Simcoe County?
So there's 2 warming centers currently in Simcoe County, one of them being in Barrie. The 100,000 came about, again, continuing that level of service. So not only January through March, but also October through December of 2023. Specifically though, because we also created the temporary shelter at Rose Street, which is a modular build for 50 beds, between the two, like, for example, this week, we activated 20 rows not to just operate as a nighttime shelter, but to remain open during the day with the inclement extreme weather happening the next 4 days. So we've activated that till the end of the weekend. So there is that flexibility. I think with warming centers in general, we've me coming to the county with a little bit of different experience of how they were operated in other municipalities. We're looking, I was having a conversation today to explore things like mobilizing, like mobile warming centers, like utilizing different opportunities through other services provided through the county or through partner agencies. So I do believe, to answer your question, the 100,000 is set up to keep the same level of the warming centers. To give you specific examples, since December 31st till today, Rose Street was averaging about 20 spaces. Okay. But the last 3 nights, it's hit capacity at 50. So we do know, obviously, it's dictated by weather and extreme, but in both, and there's so far this winter, before yesterday, there was only 2 activations of the warming centers. So to do it by average and by a milder winter, the 100,000 should be able to address this year's needs, since it's been underutilized so far.
Okay. May I further clarify with this year, knowing that we sometimes have very long winters, and are we talking like from a December calendar year, so it'll cover off the beginning of next winter as well then, around forecasted support?
Correct, through the mayor. That's correct. Again, like it starts with the budget year of January through end of March, and then reactivating in October through December. So it's about 6 months worth of funding.
Okay, thank you. I'll take my other questions tied to warming centers away, but I think that's great because I think at least I'm already getting questions about, members of our community getting ready to look for funding and knowing it's time for budget deliberations and saying, who do I talk to about getting money for a warming center to fit some gaps? And so I think that's also probably part of a communication to say, not just point at your budget to say it's in there, go look for it, but how is it being operationalized, and actually, is that going to meet the need? Not just in Barrie, where we've seen very significant demand and funding that we've come up with that wasn't planned for, and how do we mitigate some of that through different forecasting and who can support an unmet need? So thank you for that. My other question is more around a point of information related to the Rapid Housing Initiative funding federally, if it's fair to ask this. And I'm asking only because historically I know that that federal money went through a couple of cycles around being looked at for potential investment, and that I believe that particular funding, there was $500 million under a city stream. 41 municipalities were awarded some funding, I think in November publicly, and Simcoe County was identified as one of those 41. I didn't know, in looking at your budget, if you know what you've received. I don't know if that's public facing yet, or because it's tied to, I believe, either purchasing and retrofitting of property, but the outcome being ongoing, sustainable, affordable units. And can you speak at all to that good news, I would say? And is there any awareness about those dollars having any determination yet about where they're going, and if that is being aligned to any of our developments in Barrie?
So through the mayor, the amount allocated hasn't been publicly announced. Okay. Will be coming. We've been notified in this month of February. There should be a public announcement, and then thereafter, there'll be a report coming to County Council explaining the plans for that. Because the timelines are incredibly tight with rapid rehousing, it limits your choices of which projects will meet the criteria. We don't tend to have a challenge with the population it serves, since we have a very large wait list, as the mayor had mentioned, but also, the vulnerable populations are not the customized issue here. It's the ability to complete the project within the very quick timelines. There is round 3 as well, and this is where the planning team will come into focus on how we can leverage some of our other projects in flight to then shift funding and maybe address some of that gaps that Bill 23 may have started to impact. There's a little bit of that. We're also exploring very quick infill, sustainable builds that can happen quickly, as well as another way to shift kind of over cost to other projects by leveraging RHI Part 3 and Part 4, so.
And thank you, and very fair, I mean, from a commentary, and so I respect that, and I appreciate knowing whether or not that funding is known and that has otherwise been incorporated into the budget in any way, or if that's something that it sounds like we'll hear about later. I guess my final question, and it might be for either of you, but I know, Mr. Wilcox, you identified talking about the scattered units. And Mr. Bishop talked and very well put, we're not looking to evict anyone, that there is a plan, and that is well appreciated. But in reference to the funding, is there a forecast around then seeing that investment that's going to be pivoted and repurposed into some of the capital? And so is this is that forecasting of, I believe you've referenced 30 million, perhaps, is that referenced in and across a 10-year capital plan, or is it a shorter time frame?
Sure. So it's both. I think the forecasting is based on the average cost of the sale of a home in Barrie, and then it's average on, obviously based on opportunity and attrition. So once a unit vacates, and then you have the opportunity to put it up. So it is planned for 10 years, but the replacement strategy is tied to our more short-term developments. So the idea is to replace those RGI units and have have that service level maintained because it's legislatively required. But then over time, because we know you're not going to be able to sell 61 units because they don't vacate that way. But there is like those strategies where you leverage some opportunities with RHI and other things to create infills or create units faster, to create the vacancies in order to be able to raise the money sooner. The projection, though, is an older projection. It's about 2 years old, so it doesn't necessarily, it was a conservative projection based on the housing markets at the time. It may have actually leveled out to stay the same based on some of the current market conditions that are currently happening right now.
And I'm going to beg a bit more of your time. So are there any particular Barrie developments? So would Rose Street, like for instance, when we talk about individuals transitioning from perhaps single detached to other options as they become available for occupancy, is Rose Street in particular like an option that we should be thinking about to say, this development is actually going to be supporting that initiative because people will be transitioning, and I'm assuming there's a priority there, or is the priority on balance to be housing individuals that are underhoused or on a wait list, or will it actually prioritize individuals that support a financial strategy with respects to selling off the single dwelling units?
Through the mayor, I think it's a balanced approach, and it has to be because you want to make sure that you create a balanced community that you're developing. Depends on the house composition and the size of the unit counts that you're developing as well. Many of the residents residing in single-family homes are often overhoused, meaning the family has now grown up and moved out, and there's nowhere to place the person, so they're holding a 3 or 4 bedroom home, and it's 1 or 2 individuals. So yes, so usually through development, and this is a common practice across Ontario, when you do develop, you can use that as a method to resize or rehouse people to the correct household size by legislation, and thereafter opening up the right unit, opening up those either for rehousing of large families or in this case for creating new revenue streams in order to be able to help fund some of the capital. Again though, it's like what comes first. You're going to have to invest to create those units and then relocate and retransition. And transition costs are something you have to factor into your capital if you're going to do that. I do think though that, and then the market dictates availability and whether it's a good time to actually try to sell. Because what you don't want to do is sell and, kind of lose an opportunity that may be available to you in 2 or 3 years later, so.
Yeah, great points. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Councillor Rittmer.
Just one question. Right now you have underway a social services review. Can you tell us what the status of that review is, and are there any recommendations coming out of that?
Through you, the mayor. Yes, so there are 2 separate reviews happening right now. Currently, We're completing a review on the emergency shelter system as a system service manager, how it's operated, how supports and services are delivered through those programs. And we'll be coming to Simcoe County Council in April with a report with some recommendations from what we've heard through the independent consultant that conducted the review. The second one is it's the 10-year affordable housing and homelessness strategy. This year is the 10th year of our first strategy. So in the summer to fall, we'll be undergoing a new 10-year strategy with a complete community engagement and process. And we'll be coming again to council with a recommendation of the new plan and some of the new goals we'd like to set, and sharing some of the accomplishments of what was completed in the first 10 years.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I guess my first question is in relation to the announcement that the provincial government made yesterday with Humber River Hospital and also our own RVH Hospital as being a test pilot for providing additional services for those that are in long-term care and having them access testing much quicker. There was some reference in that announcement that paramedics were going to be used for those transports. I know it's only a day, I know it was only yesterday, but is there any clarity as to what impact it could have on our paramedic services? Because obviously it's something that's unanticipated and now is potentially going to put a strain on your resources by taking ambulances off the street from being able to attend emergency calls when needed.
Thank you for that question through you, Mayor Nuttall. This is actually a very exciting opportunity. Thank you for mentioning it. I neglected to speak to it during the presentation. It's a great partnership with the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre. It's being supported through Ontario Health, and really it's going to help fast track residents in long-term care homes so they can get into the hospital when they need non-urgent but necessary X-ray diagnostics so that they can quickly get those tests done, get the services they need as a result, and back into the long-term care home. We don't anticipate that this will require significant additional resources at all. This is something that our paramedic services will be working within our existing deployment plan, with our existing resources within the city of Barrie, and working with local long-term care homes that are partnering as part of this pilot to really create kind of a bypass program. So rather than the ambulance going to the long-term care home, the paramedics taking the long-term care resident to the hospital, them ending up in the emergency department could be for quite lengthy periods of time. This will look at a type of bypass where they'll go directly through a communication process up to diagnostic imaging, get the X-rays that they need, and then get them back into their home where they're comfortable. And so it's really a great opportunity for improved care for residents in long-term care. It's going to, we anticipate decreased wait times in the emergency department, so it's going to be a great opportunity for the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre as well. And we're planning to do this within our existing deployment and resource program. So there is some additional funding that will be available if there are some additional costs that we identify through the pilot, through Ontario Health, but it will not impact our response times, our current response times within the city of Barrie. So we're very excited about this and look forward to bringing you updates as we move forward with the program.
Great, thank you. Yeah, like I know it is obviously something that's significant in the medical world to be able to fast track people and obviously not have our paramedics sitting in emerge for 3 to 4 hours sometimes, if not even longer. I was just kind of curious just from an impact perspective, but it sounds like obviously you guys have already dissected this and see that where your time savings of other pieces of being lagged in emerge this is going to make up for that. So
Absolutely.
glad to hear. And the reason I was kind of going down this road was I know in your budget it's talking about 1 new ambulance with 6 new paramedics, and I was just kind of curious as to whether or not that was enough, or do we need to see more than that to be able to accommodate this new pilot project that was just announced yesterday. So I'm glad to hear everything's going to work out, and we'll be glad to hear an update in the future when you guys reattend.
We look forward to that.
My next question is obviously something that's near and dear to the mayor's heart, and it's to do with the social housing piece. Because I know we've seen, unfortunately, the big build in Aurelia that went significantly over budget, and I believe of that $80 million, I think Barrie was responsible for about $18 million of that. But when it comes to looking at partnerships, now, has there ever been any discussions, like I know Peel Region, for instance, just a few years ago partnered with Indwell. Well, Indwell is based out of Hamilton, predominantly has done everything in Western Ontario. This was their first build to get into Peel with the Lakeshore Lofts. And in my discussions with the people at Indwell, it seems like they're able to build things at a significantly lower rate per square foot than what I've been seeing being built around here in Simcoe County. Has the county ever reached out to partner with groups like Indwell as a not-for-profit organization? Because I think there's significant cost savings when it comes to moving forward in that type of fashion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor. So there's two. I think I just want to give a point of clarification. Since 2014, the county has been developing social housing and has been doing it through nonprofits and cooperatives by just funding them through different provincial funding streams. It's only in the more recent times that we have been using direct funding to fund our own units or our own funding through at Simcoe County Housing Corp and others. So there's been a combination of both. And in fact, I think the numbers are since 2014, it's been about 1,000 units created through different projects and programs. Not all of them bricks and mortars. Obviously, there's rent supplement and housing allowances and other portable housing benefits as a part of that number. But so the short answer is, I think historically there's been a history of that, smaller builds, smaller capacity. I think the Indwells and other larger nonprofit developers that are quite successful in Ontario have an opportunity to explore. I think in terms of the price per unit, I think sometimes that's hard to compare. It depends on the level of service and amenities provided in the community that's being developed and what type of development is. If it's for families or singles or single adults, those all kind of contribute to the size and capacity of that community. And then in terms of the combination of revenues. So if you're doing a mixed income building, you have to have some amenities in order to drive some of the market rate rents that will help make that unit or that build sustainable. I think exploring partnerships is never a bad thing. I think exploring them with experienced developers that have put together like high quality developments like Indwell is certainly something we do. I can't speak to the past of how often we've explored that, but I do know in the last month that I've been here, we've had many different developers approaching us for different ideas, especially because of the rapid rehousing initiatives, where there's a lot more modular opportunities that have been explored, things of that nature. So I think in general partnerships are good, and that's something we certainly explore. Some of the experiences in other municipalities, like the private-public partnerships that happened well before any federal provincial funding was allocated in the early 2000s, in Toronto and other places, have shown us a different way to develop. And I think, with Bill 23 and other kind of limitations happening, it might be something that needs to be revisited at those approaches, that necessarily weren't needed because we had our DC charges and other revenues to help us develop in capital. But again, I think it's very early to see how we would develop and foster those relationships and what that funding model would look like. My experience has shown me, while on paper it may seem like it's a significant difference, but once you factor in your 30-year maintenance and capital costs for that building, because the per unit cost was a little bit different, materials or sustainability, they might not be reaching the same greenhouse or net zero goals that a municipality might be committed to. Those are things that will come on the back end of those operations, of those buildings. So I think we balance the two. Also things like developing for expansion, making sure utility ties and things are already put in on the first build rather than in the second or third build. So I think you've seen that with the developments in Wasaga Beach and Victoria Harbor and the different developments where we've been developing to grow. So while that could be factored into the per unit cost now, it probably saves you extraordinarily more on the second and third phases of those developments in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think you hit the nail on the head with one piece as to what does actually significantly add to the capital cost of these builds is the fact that municipalities are typically looking for net zero, green roofs and different things. And I know from talking to a local developer, that was the first thing they highlighted is how difficult it is to try and build what they would build for a normal sale when all of a sudden they're dealing with a municipality, whether at the city level, county level, because now all of a sudden there's all these other extra layers that they want added in to hit these targets. And that's where it's great to have those. However, when it all of a sudden adds another 30 to maybe even sometimes 40% to the capital costs, I think we need to, it's something that needs to be revisited, because I wouldn't buy a house that costs 30% more because it's net zero, and I don't anticipate that we should expect the taxpayers to be building stuff that's that much more expensive just to be able to hit these different targets, especially when you look at all the other technology that can go into the capital pieces nowadays to offset the issues that were in the past. My last quick question is in regards to the Rose Street development. I know it originally is set for 8 stories and 150 units. I've asked this question once before about the fact that there is space on that site to definitely increase height and density, and which ultimately would increase the unit count. And then obviously I'm assuming some of these units are automatically going to be taken by these single units that you're going to be selling off, because you obviously have to relocate those individuals. Where are we at when it comes to adding any height and density to that project at this point in time?
The very few discussions, through you, Mr. Mayor, the very few discussions I've been involved in, I know it's come up that this is part of the strategy to seek different compositions and counts on the units to start to run different financial plans to see what is the correct density now to adjust to some of the deficits we're going to face. So I don't think it's an absolute exploration right now, but certainly we'll come back with a report specifically with different options on that site and what it would mean and what kind of revenue it could generate through the rent revenue. Again, we're looking for obviously operationally sustainable developments, and right now, like, that would require intensification in order to do so. So it's just making sure we can explore that. Again, there is a limit before it becomes too much in terms of a community, and building vertical communities can be complicated if you start to over-intensify. So we have to balance those things to make sure it's a successful community.
Great, thank you.
If I could, Mayor, if I could just add to that. When we're doing our social housing builds, we've built them to what I call be financially sustainable. So and that excludes capital. So what we've done is that we've done projections of how much those are going to cost, including all of the asset management requirements related to those builds, and incorporated any rent geared income and other funding that's in there, and we built them to be self-sustaining. So there are rent components, as Mina mentioned. There's other leases that we have. We have the Collingwood development that has lease space. That's planned for Aurelia. That would most definitely be planned for Barrie. That helps sustain that building. So that building will not be a burden on the taxpayers once it's built. That's the way we're trying to build them. So to build to that standard as well, we're trying to build it with operations in mind so that it minimizes the long-term life costs of that facility. So that's the way we've done it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to follow up, and I see Councillor Morales after that. In terms of the net zero building standard, is that something that's in place for the social housing builds? No.
Through the mayor, no. There is no net zero requirement for our facilities. We do look at opportunities for trying to reduce GHGs and make it more operationally better in terms of lower consumption of gas and electricity and those kind of things. But no, there's no net zero requirement.
I would implore you that if your choice is 25% more cost or 25% more people housed, that we would go with 25% more people housed. Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nettle. To the previous presenter, just Councillor Harvey asked a question. Thank you for the wholesome response. I think the question was, and I'm paraphrasing here, has the county contacted Indwell in the past? And I know you provided a holistic response, and I know you've been here for 4 weeks. Are you aware if the county has ever liaisoned with Indwell?
Through the mayor, to be honest, personally, no, I'm not aware, but I could go find out and
Okay.
share that in more detail.
And the reason I ask, I'm not going to turn my question to a comment. I echo Councillor Harvey's comments. He and I have casually interacted, hey, have you noticed Indwell? And I'm like, yeah. And I actually went to Councillor Harvey. I'm like, how do you know about Indwell? I've been following them on social media, on Facebook, for about 1.5 years. They are, again, without knowing numbers, and I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but they're probably one of the most robust and successful social housing developers in Ontario, if not Canada, bar none. They have over 3,300 followers likes on Facebook, which is pretty impressive for a social housing developer. Their social media is better than mine. I like social media, and they blow me out of the water on this. They're a social housing developer. They have construction managers. They have producers. They partner with churches in Hamilton. There's a picture here of them having a perspectives of a pro forma to do a pitch to a church to develop on their land. Does that sound familiar, members of council? That's the kind of stuff we want to do, and I think a task force might have put some bullet points on a PowerPoint somewhere that's sitting in one of our hard drives. They're actually meeting with the churches. These meetings are happening, and then they post about doing it, and they get enthusiasm, they get buy-in. So I think there's a big opportunity for the county, even the city, to even approach them to see if A, they're interested in coming up here to County of Simcoe. We're not too far from Hamilton, relatively, and if they're not necessarily interested in expanding, at the very least sharing their best practices if they're willing to do that, because they're getting these units built. It's not theoretical for them. And it's at a pace where a lot of their branding lately in the last 2 months, again, they post like crazy, it says celebrating 1,000 homes, 1,000 units. And I don't even know the time span in which that is. So if possible, I think it would be at least worth a phone call.
Through the mayor, I absolutely agree. I know that time span was 2014 till now. So I'm very familiar with Indwell, and it would be someone we'd reach out to at the very least for advice, but maybe some also brainstorming or partnership opportunities. I do think there's a lot of other similar developers as well, like nonprofit social housing developers that have done really well in Ontario. And I know that the county participates on many different social housing and nonprofit tables, including ONFA and other places where we're often engaged and connecting. But yeah, absolutely, that's on the to-do list for sure.
Are there any other questions for the presenters this evening? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. I'm looking for a little clarification for my own. In slide 11, you don't need to pull it up. You guys probably know more than you forgot more than I know. But in the weighted to tax assessment and all that, so pretty much the more service that Barrie receives, the more we pay, correct? Is that kind of the way I'm reading it? Like 100% caseload and stuff like that?
Through the mayor, yeah, there are two methods. The one method is a usage-based method, or there's a method of allocation based upon another metric like population or weighted taxable assessment. So weighted taxable assessment is not based upon usage, the caseload is. So caseload would be in terms of the number of residents. It could be the number of OW cases, children served, that kind of thing. With paramedic services, we don't do that, so that, there are other municipalities that do it by number of calls, call volume, but we do it based upon weighted taxable assessment.
Okay. Yeah, so there's not really an incentive to keep, asking for, from where I'm sitting, the distribution of services throughout the whole county is a better model, because if you weight one city, then the taxpayers pay the freight. So I like to see the investment in other communities as well as Barrie. You guys were performing an audit on the services providers in Barrie, or has that been undertaken yet of our services?
Through the mayor. Yes, Deputy Mayor. There is a service review that was conducted by a third-party consultant on our overall shelter system and our emergency shelter service delivery model, and in April we'll be coming with a report with some recommendations on how to move forward on a new funding and service delivery model.
So I know it's a little bit premature, and this will be my last question, and it's late and stuff. Is there any model where the funding is tied to performance, or is the county model basically per head, per bed, here's your dollars, and there's no oversight? And look, you guys seem like you're paying attention to it, but you drive around and you can see one model that's providing the exact same service to the same community, but they're night and day in our community. And, it's our residents that suffer that, the behaviors of some of them, of the, I guess, patrons of the facilities. And then, so, I was just wondering if that's what it would come down to.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Deputy Mayor. So the review is precisely to do that. It's to look at how to build better budgets that focus on your outcomes rather than your service levels. So the idea here is to move away from how many people you serve, but how well you serve them. And it's kind of a results-based accountability where you ask yourself, how much are we doing, how well are we doing it, and who's better off? So I think you'll see in that report a design where we're asking partners to come to the table and propose how they're going to apply the Housing First model, how they're going to be housing focused in their service, especially in emergency shelters, and what are those results going to look like? How many people are you going to permanently house, or how many people you're going to assist in finding supports or housing that put you on the road to permanent housing? So yeah, absolutely. And to answer the first part of your question, yes, there are models, many of them successful models in other municipalities and jurisdictions. Not to say that what's happening here isn't good or bad. I can't make that determination, but what I can say is that there's certainly going to be an analysis that points towards some common goals as a community that we're trying to achieve in terms of ending chronic homelessness.
Perfect. And yeah, I'll close off with that. That's exciting because Mayor Nuttall and myself were out on Christmas Eve, and we were delivering meals and stuff, and had a lot of great conversations with some of the people at the facilities, and the services they were looking for, or the assistance they were looking for, were not being provided, which, to basically say they were spinning their tires, and, they were losing hope. And, these services are supposed to, give people the opportunity to get back to what they are, I guess, kind of like what they're capable of, right? So, thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. And just on that audit, will those results be available to the Human Services Committee? They will.
Report would go to the Human Services Committee.
Will the raw results be available as well, in terms of going through the audit, in terms of where we feel that there's already been a good, efficient, effective use of dollars to results?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think what we'll try to present, again, is an analysis of how things are currently operated, and then a vision of how they will be operated. And we will, geographically place that service level so that, each area where services are being provided, you can kind of see the level of service currently and what we're trying to achieve. I do know that, HIFIS and the data collection systems in place are now growing and becoming more stronger, so it is going to certainly be data informed, and that review was a review of that data along with their day-to-day operations and how they utilize funding effectively.
And just to echo Deputy Mayor Thompson, one of the things that we encountered on Christmas Eve was a high school friend of mine who'd lost his mother, one of his brothers, and his girlfriend to overdoses. And there was other items related to family members. It was incredibly sad, and the frustration that was being expressed about trying to do better and trying to get help. You've got to take it. I have to take it face value. And so, I think what Deputy Mayor Thompson was getting at is, we want to help that guy. We also want to help all the other individuals. So let's make sure these are results oriented going forward.
Through the mayor, absolutely. I think that experience isn't rare, unfortunately, and I think the goal should be that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. And I think you'll see that in our future state of what we propose moving forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the county for your presentation tonight, for answering the many, many, many questions. And the work you do is valuable, and we certainly have gratitude for what you do to help individuals both in our community and throughout the county. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
We're now going to move on to inquiries. Are there any inquiries around the council table this evening? Seeing none, I'm actually going to change one of the announcements to an inquiry, Dawn, if that's okay. With regards to this week, specifically Friday is going to be an extremely cold day, and we're on the back of the county presentation with regards to warming facilities. Is there any way that you could provide some of the information on that?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, for the question. Yes, the temperature forecast for Friday is an extreme cold warning. As the county mentioned, the city and the county funded the John Howard Society to provide a warming center overnight when the temperature reached minus 15 degrees Celsius or lower, or was forecasted for a 2-hour period or greater. And as well, the city and the county jointly funded the 20 Rose Street location, which has 50 beds associated with it as a temporary emergency shelter. So both of those are operating, and during extreme cold warnings, the county has authorized the 20 Rose Street Center to be open during the daytime as well.
Thank you. And CEO Prowse, going into Friday, can we ensure that our communications department is doing everything we can in terms of communicating what's available to individuals who might not be able to get inside?
Absolutely, Mayor. No, thank you.
Thank you. Announcements, Councillor Kungle.
I have one, and as we have Jane Sinclair just leaving the audience, this pertains to all the work happening in long-term care and retirement homes. So thank you to Jane on that. I won't hold you up as you exit, but did want to say there is the Show the Love campaign. And so if you haven't heard about it, a couple of years ago during COVID, Sandra Eason-Bruno and her team with the North Simcoe Muskoka Specialized Geriatric Services started an initiative with Barrie Police, and others have soon followed along. And basically the campaign is to write letters or show online support to both individuals and people working and living in retirement homes and long-term care homes. And this came out of really wanting to make sure on Valentine's Day, in addition to any other day, there's formal outreach to letting people know that they're thought of and there's some type of social connection. And so we want to continue that campaign, whether you are in Barrie or not. If you want to participate, reach out. There's a lot of social media happening. I'll post on it. But do go to Barrie Police Services online or www.nsmsgs.ca. There is a drop-off location at Barrie Police. They are managing the distribution of cards, and please use the hashtag Show the Love. I have cards and stickers in the Councillors Lounge. I invite members of council and staff, if you're on site before next Wednesday, please complete a card, and I'll manage to make sure that that gets dropped off, and we can participate in this campaign.
That's awesome. Thank you, Councillor Kung. Are there any other announcements this evening? Seeing none, I will proceed with announcements. February is Black History Month, and the City of Barrie, in collaboration with the Barrie Anti-Racism Task Force, is proud to promote events and programming that will bring awareness to the significant contributions that Black Canadians have made and continue to make to the cultural landscape of our country and our community. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/Black History Month. To learn more about the Barrie Anti-Racism Task Force, please visit barrieanti-racism.ca. And just on that announcement, we had a flag raising today here at City Hall. It was incredibly well attended. I always like to remind members of the community, we have incredible Black history here in this community. And it's in my kitchen, I have a picture of the Oro African Church, which I believe is certainly the oldest standing in Canada. It might be North America, I believe, as I recall when I was in Ottawa and it was designated National Heritage Site. We once in a while recognize that, and unfortunately it's only once in a while, and we need to make sure that it's consistent. So through this month, please do pay attention to the different celebrations that are going on, the different events that are going on, and even I believe CEO Prowse has been able to help with our culture department on some things that are happening on the 25th, I believe, of February, so please pay attention to that. The City of Barrie is seeking feedback on public art themes to be considered for the future Allendale Transit Mobility Hub. Feedback can be provided via buildingbarrie.ca/mobility hub. For more information on the Allendale Transit Mobility Hub, visit barrie.ca/transit hubs project. As a reminder, citizen applications are now being accepted for the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Arts Advisory Committee, Communities in Bloom Committee, Seniors and Accessibility Advisory Committee, and the Town and Gown Committee. The application deadline is February 17th at 4:30 p.m. For more information, email appoint@barrie.ca or visit barrie.ca/committees and task forces. Applications are also being accepted for the Arts and Culture Investment Program. The program strengthens Barrie's arts and culture community through strategic investments in the work of not-for-profit arts and culture organizations. The application deadline is February 15th. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/ACIP. A reminder that Barrie's Winterfest will be held on February 4th and 5th, located in Heritage Park in Barrie's downtown. The event includes spectacular ice and snow sculptures, of which we now have snow to build, which is great, lumberjack shows, polar bear dip, family entertainment, drop-in activities, skating, and much more. Please visit barrie.ca/winterfest for more information. The Recreation and Culture Department has a full calendar of events and programming for February, including Hello Winter, Winterfest, Family Day activities, theater shows, seniors activities, and arena events. For a detailed list, go to barrie.ca and search recreation programs. The Universal Transit Pass, or U-Pass, for Georgian College students has been extended until August 31st, 2024. For student transit options and U-Pass information, please visit georgiancollege.ca barrie.ca/transit and barrie.ca/transit. The City of Barrie is looking for feedback from residents on the city's drinking water that will assist in continually improving the service delivery of water operations. To access the survey, visit barrie.ca/water services before the February 10th deadline. The city is updating its waterfront strategic plan and seeking feedback from residents, businesses, and organizations on the next steps in developing the plan. The survey deadline is February the 6th. The survey is available at buildingbarrie.ca/waterfront plan. Just as a reminder, overnight on-street parking and waterfront parking restrictions are still in effect until March 31st, 2023. For more information, please visit barrie.ca/snow and barrie.ca/parking. That completes all of the announcements. Bylaws, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, third on this day and finally passed. Bill 004-005.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Hamilton that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. These are Bills 004 and 005. Are there any questions or comments around the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Bill 006, the confirmation bylaw.
It's getting late, Deputy Mayor Thompson. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. The confirmation bylaw, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 006. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is carried. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Rittma, seconded by Deputy Mayor Thompson. All those in favor? It carries at 10:36 p.m. on February 1st.